Chapter 825. The Eye of the Peacock was formed from the first Peacock King's eyes after his death. This was because the first Peacock King had a very special eye technique. The Eye of the Peacock had 2 mirrors in total. They were 2 pieces of lianbois. At this moment, Kong Huan had only summoned one of them. Originally, they should have appeared together. Kong Huan had only summoned one of them. Perhaps he had a backup plan. However, Yu Luo did not expect that a lianbois like this would appear on Kong Huan's body. As far as she could remember, there were only a few pieces of lianbois in the entire divine Peacock Mountain. After all, lianbois was a treasure that could only be refined by a lotus scholar. There were not many lianbois in the infinite realms either. However, Yu Luo was not afraid. She would not have come for revenge unless she was truly capable. Moreover, she had Sumo behind her. She knew that the Demon King was definitely more powerful than she was. Whoosh! Kong Huan summoned the Eye of the Peacock into the air and quickly formed a seal. Light of the Peacock, illuminate the world! Kong Huan shouted. Then, the ancient mirror shone with an even more intense light. The entire area seemed to be enveloped in a reddish-black light. Under the Eye of the Peacock, this place seemed to be a world of its own. Many of the reddish-black light shot toward Yu Luo like thousands of flying swords. However, Yu Luo waved a hand. Green light shone, and an ancient umbrella appeared in the air. The mysterious yellow umbrella released thousands of rays of green light that enveloped her like ribbons. The Eye of the Peacock's black-red light could not penetrate the umbrella at all. However, Kong Huan, Bai Lian, and Huang Ling attacked Yi Wuhui from different directions at the same time. The Eye of the Peacock was only a tactic. As it floated in the air, Kong Huan and the other 2 did not have to worry about Yu Luo's supremacy pressure. Their attacks followed immediately. The 3 attacked in unison. They knew that none of them were Yu Luo's match. Only by cooperating could they put up a fight. Kong Huan's technique was a sealing technique. It was a technique that specifically targeted the Peacock bloodline. Kong Huan formed a seal with both hands and bit the tip of his tongue. A drop of soul blood formation technique. A blood-red seal rose from his head and suppressed Yu Luo. On top of the seal, there was a phoenix spreading its wings and about to take flight. Bai Lian's technique was still filled with endless gray light. This was because this gray light was a spell that could restrain the peacock's 5-colored holy light. In the entire divine Peafowl Mountain realm, aside from the 3 venerables, only Bai Lian could use this Dao technique. He was originally the enforcer of the entire divine Peacock Mountain, and his methods were extraordinary. Bai Lian's technique could suppress almost all peacocks of the same level. Usually, even Kong Huan had to be wary of him. Huang Ling did not cast any spell. Instead, he swung the 2 sabers in his hand. The 2 sabers, one yin and one yang, were called yin-yang blades. Those were 2 venerable divine weapons, and they were of a rather high grade. Huang Ling was the yellow bird. Her yin-yang blade was ever-changing and extremely sharp. It was said that the 72 peaks of the peacock were not formed naturally. A part of it was cleaved open by the yin-yang blade. Although they were at a disadvantage in terms of cultivation base, ordinary venerable ones would have to retreat if the 3 of them joined forces. At this moment, Yi Wuhui could not help but look at Sumo. "Are we still not going to make a move?" Yi Wuhui asked. "Not yet," Sumo said. "Yu Luo should be able to handle it. You and I will be on our guard. It won't be too late to make a move if she's really in danger. If the other party uses lianbois again, have Yao Ying use lianbois to deal with it." "Alright." Yi Wuhui nodded. Meanwhile, the forces of the other peaks of Divine Peacock Mountain were also rushing over. Gradually, thousands of cultivators gathered behind Kong Huan and the other 2 experts. These cultivators were at least at the first sempiternal realm. At this moment, cultivators below the first sempiternal realm had no right to watch the battle. It could be said that this was the highest level battle that Divine Peacock Mountain had seen in tens of millions of years. When they looked again, Yu Luo's eyes suddenly glowed red. The immortal energy in her body had completely manifested. Her blue hair danced in the wind, and her black dress billowed. She was a black peacock that harbored a myriad of grievances between heaven and earth. Boom! Kong Huan's technique was the first to descend. However, the yellow mystic umbrella had dissipated more than half of its power. Yulua pointed 2 fingers on her right hand upward. White light swirled around her fingertips. It was an orthodox Buddhist immortal technique. A white lotus of light appeared. At that moment, Yulua's body was plated with a layer of Buddhist light. Open! Boom! Crack! Kong Huan's blood seal was directly shattered by Yulua's technique. The sky was filled with profound light, and it engulfed a radius of 100 miles. The blood seal was useless against Yulua. Within the profound light, a gray light suddenly appeared. Bai Lian's technique was like gray sand suddenly swept into a storm, and each grain of sand contained a strange power. The gray light was indeed somewhat different. Even with the yellow mystic umbrella above Yulua's head and Buddhist light around her body, she could not help but feel her soul tremble. After all, that was the power of law. The peacock's own bloodline could not completely ignore it. However, Yulua now possessed the inheritance of Paradise Earth. Almost all of her most powerful immortal techniques came from Yunsan. In an instant, a lotus appeared under her feet. With a lotus on top of her head and a lotus under her feet, the Buddhist Supreme's protective lotus was extraordinary. At the same time, Yulua waved a hand, and a white light suddenly flew out. The white jade holy gourd floated in the air. Collect! The sky full of gray light was directly collected by the white jade holy gourd. Not only that, Yulua's mind moved, and the white jade holy gourd headed straight for Bai Lian. Bai Lian's expression changed slightly. Huang Ling's saber had already arrived. In fact, everything happened almost at the same time. The white saber in front, the black saber behind. Huang Ling's posture was extremely elegant. His saber was not fast, and it even had a hint of gentleness. However, there was a faint sound of wind and thunder on the edge of the saber. All of his power was concentrated on the edge of the saber, and he did not unleash it. This time, the greatest threat to Yulua from the three's attack was Huang Ling's saber. Yulua could not block such an attack with just her technique alone. Therefore, while blocking Kong Huan and Bai Lian, Yulua had already drawn her sword. Swoosh! The endless Buddhist light turned into a white light. At that moment all the profound light dimmed, and only the white light pierced through the sky. Lianbua, Kong Huan, Bai Lian, and Huang Ling's expressions changed again. They knew what it meant to have a venerable who possessed Lianbua. Yulua was no longer someone they could stop. In the next instant they could die. Huang Ling's saber had already been unleashed, and there was no way to retract it. However, she gritted her teeth and simply let go. At the same time, she retreated rapidly. Crack, boom, the endless Buddhist light and the yin-yang blade collided. The yin-yang blade was known as the sharpest blade in the peacock astral, but it was like rotten wood before the endless Buddhist light. Both sabers were broken by the endless Buddhist light. However, in that instant, Huang Ling had already fled hundreds of miles away. On the other side, Kong Huan and Bai Lian wanted to leave as well. However, Yulua's lips curled up and she said coldly, Kong Huan, Bai Lian, you two must die. Whoosh, the immeasurable Buddhist light changed its direction. Huang Ling could be left alive for now, but Peacock, Flying Wolf, and Yulua had to be killed. Chapter 826. Samsara of the Ichizo will be updated later today. Currently in the middle of typing, please wait a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 827. None of the peacocks would be spared. That was Yu Luo's obsession. Thus, Kong Huan's fate was sealed. He was someone Yu Luo had to kill. Bai Lian, the Flying Wolf King, was Fallen Star's best friend, so he had to be killed as well. The gourd had long since attacked Bai Lian. However, Bai Lian waved his hand and summoned a ray of light. The light was a white jade disc, which was also an exalted divine weapon. The jade disc flew into the air and expanded in the wind. It hovered in the air like a white jade canopy. It was a defensive Dharma treasure. Bai Lian didn't expect it to fight the enemy. He only hoped that it could block the gourd for a while so he could escape. He predicted that he would be saved if he could escape for a while. After all, some cultivators had already gone to invite Wang Zun and the two patriarchs. However, Bai Lian's hopes were dashed. Yu Luo's boundless Buddhist light was heading for him first. Boom, crack, the boundless Buddhist light struck the jade disc. Although it was a supremacy weapon, it couldn't withstand the boundless Buddhist light. The Lianbua immortal sword was almost invincible. In the air, the jade disc, which had expanded to a radius of dozens of feet, was cut in half. Under the boundless Buddhist light, the jade disc was like a piece of tofu. Huh! Bai Lian's soul trembled, his face turning pale. If the jade disc couldn't block the immortal sword, his other Dharma treasures would be useless. The peacock's eye was still in the air. However, it was a Dharma treasure controlled by Kong Huan. The peacock's eye had already retreated with Kong Huan. The main mountain was protecting Kong Huan and had no time to spare for Bai Lian. Whoosh, a vicious glint flashed across Bai Lian's eyes. Then, he willed it. His moon-white robe suddenly fluttered, as if it was filled with endless immortal qi. The robe instantly turned into a cloud of mist. An escape technique. Yu Luo raised an eyebrow. That was no ordinary escape technique. However, Bai Lian couldn't escape. Zzzt, boom. The boundless Buddhist light struck the cloud of mist formed by the white robe. Then, the clouds suddenly exploded, forming endless waves of qi that spread out layer by layer like clouds. The wave of air stacked in the air. In fact, the mist was extremely poisonous. If the poisonous gas were to spread, even the cultivators of divine Peafowl Mountain would suffer. It was an indiscriminate attack, and it was also Bai Lian's escape method. At this moment, in order to escape, Bai Lian could no longer care about the lives of the other cultivators. However, the white jade holy gourd floated in the air. Return! Yu Luo shouted. When he looked again, all the clouds were directly sucked into the white jade immortal gourd like rivers returning to the sea. At this moment, a giant white and gray wolf suddenly emerged from the clouds. The giant wolf was 100 feet tall and had a pair of wings on its ribs. It was extremely majestic. Flying wolf true body. For the sake of escaping, Bai Lian had actually chosen to reveal himself, because this way, his strength would be even greater, and it would be easier for him to escape through the fog. However, Yu Luo had been watching him for a long time. She had heard of the Flying Wolf Tribe's technique. The boundless Buddhist light turned into a white rainbow again. Bai Lian really wanted to escape, but his speed was not as fast as the boundless Buddha light. Everything happened in an instant. When they looked again, Bai Lian, who had transformed into a giant wolf, suddenly turned around. He raised his two front claws, as if he wanted to block the boundless Buddha light. His claws were like hooks, shining brightly. Actually, with Bai Lian's cultivation, he could kill a cultivator at the 5th or 6th stage of the rebirth realm with a slap of his claws. However, he was facing Lianbua's boundless Buddha light. The giant wolf turned around, wanting to use its claws and body to block the boundless Buddha light. However, a white light directly cut off his claws and stabbed into his chest. In fact, Bai Lian's body could even withstand a normal venerable divine weapon. However, the boundless Buddha light pierced through him effortlessly. However, at the last moment, the wolf actually bent down and bit the boundless Buddha light tightly, preventing it from piercing through. In fact, it only made the boundless Buddha light pause slightly. However, at this moment, Bai Lian's divine soul had already escaped. He could only give up on his body. Otherwise, his Tao would definitely be destroyed. His divine soul flew out, but he seemed to have forgotten about the white jade immortal gourd. Yu Luo shouted again, "Return!" Bai Lian's divine soul was directly absorbed by the white jade celestial gourd. At the same time, Bai Lian's divine soul exploded with a boom, turning into a bloody mist. A peak 9th stage rebirth realm expert had his divine soul and body destroyed by Yulua just like that. Although all this happened very quickly, it still took some time. Huang Ling had already disappeared, but Kong Huan did not escape. It was not that he did not want to escape, but countless blood-colored roses had appeared under his feet. Those roses had trapped his footstep. Naturally, it was Sumo who had made a move, because he did not want to let any peacock go. Of course, Yulua could not be the only one to take revenge for Xiao Huang. Sumo had even more reasons to take revenge. However, he wanted to leave some opportunities for Yulua. Otherwise, Yulua's state of mind would not be complete. At this moment, the peacock's eye was hovering above Kong Huan's head. Therefore, although those blood roses had trapped him, they could not do anything to him. Yulua naturally would not let go of this opportunity. Kong Huan, give me your life. Yulua raised her hand, sword already in hand. This time, she did not take out her sword. Instead, she moved, personally taking action. Boundless Buddhist light, 100 zhang long tail. Yulua's sword slashed at Kong Huan. The eye of the peacock was in the air, the bronze mirror suffused with black-red light. It was also a lianhua. However, Yulua did not hesitate. Kaboom, crack, boundless Buddhist light met the eye of the peacock. This time, it was not as easy as splitting the white jade wall. Boundless Buddhist light was clearly obstructed. Yulua also felt her arm go slightly numb. It had to be said that lianhua against lianhua, even as sharp as boundless Buddhist light, could not easily cut through the other. However, the black-red light in the sky had dissipated. Looking again, the bronze mirror in the air had been split into two, but it did not shatter. It still emitted a faint light. However, Yulua's strength did not decrease. Her wrist suddenly pressed down. At this time, Kong Huan had already been pinned in the air by Sumo's blood roses. Whoosh! Kong Huan wanted to imitate Bai Lian. In an instant, his spirit also left his body. However, Yulua did not give him the chance. She was extremely fast. Kong Huan's divine soul had only just left his body when Yulua's sword pierced through it. At the same time, boundless Buddhist light pierced through Kong Huan's body. Therefore, everything happened in an instant. At that moment, it was as if Yulua had killed two great figures at the same time. In the air, the thousands of divine peafowl mountain cultivators felt their hair stand on end. Usually, whether it was Kong Huan or Bai Lian, they were not people they could reach. They did not expect that they would die at the same time. Whoosh! In an instant, the cultivators scattered like a tide. They knew that they could not stop Yulua. However, among the cultivators, as long as they had the peafowl bloodline, a blood rose appeared under their feet. Yulua's sword was like a white snake spitting out its tongue, mercilessly cutting down all of them. In the air, a bloody mist pervaded. 5 colored feathers danced in the air. At that moment, Yulua's face showed a mournful joy. Mei Lang, I am avenging you. At that moment, 3 supremacy energies rose from the 2nd and 3rd peaks of the Peafowl Mountain. Yulua, don't be arrogant. A shout resounded through the clouds. Chapter 828. Samsara of the One Treasury will be updated later today. Currently in the middle of typing, please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 829. The aura of the Martial Highness realm instantly dissipated. Whoosh! One of the auras sealed off Yuluo's path of escape. Looking again, there was a ripple in the void and 3 cultivators appeared. The leader was a female cultivator in a black outfit. She had blue hair and a tall figure. Her skin was white as snow, and her face was extremely beautiful. She was carrying 9-tailed raccoon in her arms. The black raccoon's eyes were bloodshot. There was a 5-colored mark of a peacock on the female cultivator's glabella. It was none other than Fallen Star, the current Peacock King. 2 white-haired cultivators stood behind her. A man and a woman. They were both wearing black robes. Their faces were wrinkled, but their eyes were glittering, and their expressions were cold. They also had the mark of a peacock on their glabella. However, it was not a 5-colored mark. 7th layer Martial Highness Realm. They were the last 2 patriarchs of the Peacock tribe. In terms of seniority, they were a generation higher than the Peacock King. They were the strongest cultivators of the tribe. Yuluo came to a stop. Sumo and Yiwuhue moved closer to Yuluo. Although Fallen Star was only a 2nd-layer Martial Highness, the 2 patriarchs behind her were definitely top-notch cultivators. Their auras were stronger than Sumo's. Now, Yuluo had practically single-handedly destroyed the entire divine Peafowl Mountain. Their appearance at the same time was enough to prove the Peacock tribe's attitude. They would not let Yuluo go. Fallen Star narrowed her eyes and looked at Yuluo. There was no trace of warmth in her eyes. There was only a hint of shock that had yet to dissipate. She had been awakened from her seclusion. Yuluo was here? She did not believe it at first. Although Fallen Star was the one who uttered the shout and she had sensed Yuluo's aura, she was still in disbelief when she saw Yuluo with her own eyes. She had witnessed Yuluo committing suicide with her own eyes, and even saw her being buried. However, not only was Yuluo still alive, her cultivation was also a level higher than hers. She was extremely shocked. As a matter of fact, Fallen Star knew that Yuluo was much more talented than her. That was the reason why she hated Yuluo in the first place. She believed that everything was unfair. Everything that happened after that was the continuous deepening and expansion of this emotion. He had come back to life, and his cultivation level had risen greatly. Fallen Star felt as if her heart was stabbed by a knife. Yuluo, is it really you? Xing Luo said coldly. You're actually alive. Starfall, you didn't expect this, did you? Yuluo's expression softened when she saw Starfall. Her tone was cold, but her face was calm. Indeed. Xing Luo frowned, and then she questioned, Yuluo, why did you attack the Divine Mountain? Have you forgotten that you have the bloodline of the Peacock clan? Back then, you committed suicide. What does your death have to do with these people? The bloodline of the Peacock race? Suicide? Yuluo looked at Xing Luo and smirked. I'm sure you know better than me why I killed myself. Excuse me, where is my Meilang? Who killed him? Why is your Meilang asking me? Fallen Star gently stroked her black raccoon as she looked at Yuro with a mocking gaze. At the same time, she looked at Sumo. Demon King, let's settle our scores today. Fallen Star's eyes were bloodshot. That was because the Supreme Peacock King's incident was directly related to Sumo. There had been no news of the Supreme Peacock King for more than 3 million years. She did not even know who the purple-robed girl who sealed the Supreme Peacock King was. We should settle our scores, Sumo said in a low voice. We naturally have to settle Xiao Huang's incident. At the same time, I want to know where Mu Hongchen is. Mu Hongchen? Fallen Star smiled faintly, as if she had forgotten about this name. I'm afraid you'll have to ask the Lotus Lord about her. The Lotus Lord? Sumo raised her eyebrows. Of course. Fallen Star laughed. However, I don't think you have the ability to do so. If the Lotus Lord was here, you would have been annihilated long ago. The Lotus Lord doesn't need to explain his actions to you. Is that so? Sumo's expression turned cold. Was Wu Er's incident really related to the Lotus Lord? If that was the case, it would be troublesome. However, she had to settle the matter at hand first. Senior Demon King, leave Fallen Star to me. Fallen Star said. I want to kill her with my own hands. All right. Sumo nodded. Whoosh, when she looked again, Fallen Star had already made her move. The boundless Buddhist light in her hand went straight for Fallen Star. Once she made her move, Fallen Star did not show any mercy. She knew Fallen Star too well. If she did not kill Fallen Star, Fallen Star would definitely kill her. Everything would be the same as before. If Fallen Star did not die, Fallen Star would not be at ease. Back then, it could be said that Fallen Star had forced Fallen Star to her death. This was because Fallen Star was a threat to her. However, that kind of thing would not happen again. The boundless Buddhist light pierced Fallen Star. In terms of cultivation level, Fallen Star was one level higher. Therefore, she should have an advantage against Fallen Star. However, Fallen Star's lips curled into a cold smile. Elders, I will hold the fort for now. I want to clean up the Peafowl clan's mess. With that, Fallen Star rose into the air. The two elders behind her looked at Sumo and Yi Wuhui. Their meaning was clear. If you don't move, I won't. If you do, we won't hold back. Sumo's expression was calm. If neither side moved, it would be more advantageous for them. She had a feeling that Fallen Star had more trump cards. If Yun San had allowed her to come to Divine Peafowl Mountain for revenge, he must have made arrangements. Fallen Star waved a hand. Whoosh, a black and white light appeared in the air. It was an ancient mirror, the other eye of the peacock. There were two eyes of the peacock, and this one was in Fallen Star's possession. Fallen Star frowned at the sight of it. This was because she felt a strange power surging behind her the moment the black and white ancient mirror appeared. Red and black light surged behind her. Just now, the bronze mirror that had been split in half by the boundless Buddhist light actually merged back into one again, becoming one. At the same time, the two ancient mirrors reflected each other in the air, seemingly resonating with each other. With the red light as a medium, the black and white light shot into space. The two pieces of Lianhua seemed to form a barrier around Divine Peafowl Mountain, trapping Fallen Star within. Boom! The boundless Buddhist light slashed at the bronze mirror Fallen Star had summoned. Light radiated in all directions, and a thunderous boom reverberated through the air. However, the bronze mirror did not move in the slightest. The boundless Buddhist light did not move. Heh! My good little sister! Fallen Star sneered. Your sword cannot break through my eye of the peacock. The eye harmony is its true power. Die! Fallen Star formed a hand seal and looked at the two ancient mirrors, which rapidly began to fuse. The black and white space compressed, as if trying to kill Fallen Star. The boundless Buddhist light was useless, but Fallen Star's mystic illusion umbrella instantly opened. Although the mystic illusion umbrella was not Lianhua, its defensive capabilities were likely superior to Lianhua's. Boom! The mystic illusion umbrella propped up the two bronze mirrors, but it also buzzed and trembled. It would not be able to hold on for long. At the same time, Fallen Star formed a strange seal in front of her chest. Chapter 830. It buzzed and trembled. The golden umbrella barely managed to hold on. Yulua's technique took shape in an instant. With Yulua at the center, countless rays of azure light spread out like ocean waves. The strangest thing was that the azure light was suffused with countless starlight. At the same time, the white jade holy gourd that had been hovering in the air landed on the golden umbrella. That was because they were originally one entity. The golden umbrella and the white jade holy gourd fused into one. Its power had increased by another level. The images of the ocean, birds, and immortal islands on the umbrella were vivid. The most eye-catching was an immortal vine that extended from a cliff. The white jade holy gourd hung from the vine. At that moment, the ancient umbrella seemed to contain a world. Star, paradise! Yulua called out. Looking again, the mysterious yellow umbrella shone brightly again. The azure light was like the sea, the stars shining brightly. One of them would definitely be a paradise. It was an immortal technique created by Yun San in the Galaxy era. Whoosh, Buddha's light and flying birds were all born. The sound of the ocean was endless. Recreating the world in the world. Reconstructing spacetime. Yulua's technique broke through the restraints of the eye of the peacock. Boom! The two ancient mirrors did not truly merge and were pushed away by Yulua's technique. A door seemed to open between the two ancient mirrors. Buddhist light / The boundless Buddhist light turned into a beam of white light and shot toward Fallen Star. The moment the sword struck was the moment the eye of the peacock opened and closed. Fallen Star frowned when she saw this. She did not expect Yulua's artifact and immortal technique to be so powerful. It was not a technique of the Hanya demon race. Yulua seemed to have been reborn. She was nothing like she had been in the past. What had she experienced? ZZZT. The boundless Buddhist light shot toward her. It was a Lianhua. Fallen Star narrowed her eyes, a hint of ruthlessness flashing through them. At the same time, she made a grabbing motion in the air. When he looked again, he saw that there was a staff in her hand. It was a 5-colored staff. At the top of the staff was a lifelike peacock. The Peacock King's staff. It was the national weapon of the Peacock Imperial Court. After it was created, it was not allowed to leave the divine Peacock Mountain. It could be said that it was the #1 immortal treasure of the Peacock Imperial Court. Only the real Peacock King had the right to use it. When the new Peacock King ascended the throne, he would inject his soul blood into it. The Peacock King's scepter was Fallen Star's greatest trump card against Featherfall, who a boundless Buddhist light flew over. Fallen Star raised the Peacock King's staff in her hand to block it. Bang! The 5-colored brilliance clashed with the Buddhist light. This time, Fallen Star had the upper hand. The two pieces of Lianhua were about the same level, but the Peacock King's scepter was heavier, and it was in Fallen Starfall's hands. The boundless Buddha light was sent flying. At the same time, Fallen Star took advantage of the momentum to advance, thrusting her staff at Fallen Feather. Starfall wouldn't show any mercy to Feather Luo. Back then, she had tried every possible way to kill Yuluo. Now that Yuluo wasn't dead, it was even more difficult for him to calm down. Xing Luo wielded the Peacock King's scepter and swept up a great deal of power in the void. Then, like a 5-colored star with a tail of light, she charged toward Yuluo. The entire divine Peafowl Mountain seemed to resonate with her attack. The Peacock King's scepter seemed to have absorbed all of divine Peafowl Mountain's power. Bzzz, boom boom. The Peacock King's scepter was accompanied by the cries of countless peacock. In that moment, it was as if the entire Peacock clan was punishing Yuluo. Traitors of the clan are as good as patricide. Fallen Star shouted. Yuluo, this is the judgment of the king. The moment the Peacock King's scepter appeared, even the power of the peacock eye skyrocketed. The entire divine Peafowl Mountain was suffused with the power of the Peacock King. In divine Peafowl Mountain, Fallen Star was the true ruler. After all, this was her territory. Yiwuhui looked at Sumo, who was frowning slightly. Sumo, on the other hand, was frowning. He could sense how powerful Fallen Star was, but he was willing to believe that Yuluo still had a backup plan. Otherwise, how could she have come to divine Peafowl Mountain for revenge if she couldn't even defeat Fallen Star? The two peacock forefathers weren't watching the battle. Instead, they stared intently at Sumo. In their opinion, Sumo was far more dangerous than Yuluo. After all, Yuluo was from the Peacock clan. They believed that Yuluo wouldn't be able to cause much trouble. However, the appearance of the Galaxy Demon King had subdued their Peacock King. The Demon King must have an extremely powerful force behind him. Back then, the Demon King had only been at the Rebirth Realm, but he could already stir up everything. Moreover, he was now a venerable. He wasn't far from his previous level. The Demon King's existence was what worried the Peacock forefathers the most. Even though they were both at the 8th level of the Rebirth Realm, they definitely didn't dare underestimate the Demon King. Their idea was that Fallen Star would kill Yuluo and then deal with the Demon King. Actually, there wasn't much of a problem with their idea. However, they had underestimated Yuluo's Paradise Earth inheritance. Or rather, they didn't understand what it meant. How could they let Yuluo take the risk? Fallen Star's aura was at its peak. This time, she also believed that Yuluo would definitely die. Yuluo couldn't block her scepter. However, a strange smile appeared on Yuluo's face, as if she had been waiting for Fallen Star's moment of incomparable arrogance. Then, she would knock her into the dust. The scepter attacked. Yuluo didn't choose to dodge. Suddenly, a strange five-colored light emitted from between her brows. It looked exactly the same as the Peacock King's scepter's light. However, there was the image of a middle-aged cultivator in Yuluo's five-colored light. The Peacock King. At that moment, Fallen Star, the two peacock forefathers behind her, and the cultivators watching from Divine Peacock Mountain were all inexplicably shocked. The previous Peacock King was also Fallen Star and Yuluo's father. The Peacock King. The moment his aura appeared, the Peacock King's scepter stopped in the void. His soul blood was still in the scepter. Father! Fallen Star's expression changed drastically. Unfortunately, the Peacock King was only a spirit, and his eyes were slightly closed. He couldn't hear Fallen Star's call at all. However, that was enough. The Peacock King's scepter couldn't break through the Peacock King's spirit. He'd become Yuluo's shield. Fallen Star, it's over. Yuluo's expression turned cold. A staff suddenly appeared in her hand. However, it wasn't the peacock staff, but the plum blossom staff. At that moment, Suemo was also stunned. The plum blossom staff was in Yuluo's hands. Wang Shui had taken the staff with her. Now, the staff had been refined anew. It shone brilliantly, its immortal power boundless. The light carried the mark of a lotus flower. Lianbo. Yuluo still had Lianbo with her. However, she'd kept the Lianbo to deal with Fallen Star. Mei Lang, I've avenged you. Yuluo thought. Whoosh! The plum blossom staff stabbed at Fallen Star. Fallen Star didn't have a chance to dodge. Yuluo rammed into Fallen Star. She wanted to kill Fallen Star even if she had to perish together with her opponent. The fragrance of plum blossoms filled the air. Yuluo carried all her love and hate. Centuries of reincarnation cultivation might have been for this moment. Whoosh! At this moment, a black-robed cultivator suddenly appeared in front of Fallen Star. He wore a conical bamboo hat and a black robe. Nine-tailed raccoon. In an instant, he actually turned into 9 clones, forming a chain. All 9 clones stood in front of Fallen Star. He wanted to save his master with his death. Cat slave. Fallen Star screamed. However, Nine-tailed raccoon was unmoved. He only wanted to win a chance for Fallen Star to live. The plum blossom staff pierced through Nine-tailed raccoon's 9 clones. Black mist instantly dispersed, and light scattered like butterflies. At that moment, Sumo's eyes narrowed and he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Who in this world would know who would die for whom? Chapter 831. Who would die for whom? No one could say for sure. Within the myriad realms, one's position determined one's understanding. To Yuluo, Xiao Huang was her true love, while Fallen Star was her enemy. To Nine-tailed raccoon, Fallen Star was the person he wanted to protect, while Yuluo was his enemy. Nine-tailed raccoon had followed Fallen Star his entire life. He was a pet that Fallen Star had raised herself. Everything he had was given to him by Fallen Star. Although he was already a great demon, able to transform and roam the myriad realms, he was still most willing to stay by Fallen Star's side and be a quiet cat. His feelings for Fallen Star were actually very complicated. Fallen Star was his master, his queen, and most of all, his true love. However, as a cat slave, he did not dare to hope for it. He could only keep it in his heart. Rebirth Realm Level 6 was Nine-tailed raccoon's current realm. This realm was worlds apart from Fallen Star. Therefore, he was really just a cat slave. Usually, he was the happiest when he was in Fallen Star's arms as a cat. Today, he was willing to die for Fallen Star. Because he could not watch Fallen Star die. The plum blossom staff pierced through Nine-tailed raccoon's first clone. Actually, in a sense, the Nine-tailed black fox was practically an undying existence. Because he had 9 lives. If one did not die, the other 9 could be reborn. However, he was doing everything he could to stop Uluo's plum blossom staff. Even if he died, he just needed to block a little more. Pft, 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 pft. The plum blossom staff was unstoppable. The 9 clones were pierced one by one. In fact, it was only a split second. In the eyes of many cultivators with insufficient realms, they only saw the green light move forward, then 9 clouds of black mist instantly rose. Cat slave. Fallen Star hurriedly retreated, shouting at the same time. 9-tailed raccoon meant a lot to her. Because, in essence, Fallen Star was also a loner. However, her loneliness came from the loneliness of being at the top. In the past, she had schemed to become the true ruler of the Peacock clan. Therefore, in order to eliminate dissidents, she even plotted against her own sister. Step by step, she approached the pinnacle of power. After that, the Peacock King was sealed and taken away during the Great Battle of the Dustnet 7-star realms. With the support of the Lotus Venerable, Fallen Star had finally ascended to the throne of the Peacock King. However, on the summit, looking around, there was almost no one that she could truly trust. Her suspicions were very strong. 9-tailed raccoon was the only person she could trust. Therefore, the black raccoon was inseparable from her. This time, she didn't want to use the black raccoon. This was because a battle between venerables was no longer suitable for black raccoons to appear. However, 9-tailed raccoon appeared in an extremely tragic manner. In fact, 9-tailed raccoon had only blocked the plum blossom staff for an instant. It wasn't easy for a rebirth realm cultivator to block a venerable divine weapon, let alone Lianhua. The plum blossom staff pierced through 9-tailed raccoon and headed straight for Starfall. The tip of the plum blossom staff was already closing in on Starfall. At that moment, Fallen Star felt as if her body was about to split apart. Pain spread all over his body. It was the aura of death. However, the instant 9-tailed raccoon fought to the death gave Fallen Star a chance. The plum blossom staff had already hit Fallen Star, but it didn't have time to penetrate her body. The 2 venerables behind Fallen Star had already made their moves. They couldn't sit back and watch Fallen Star die. Fallen Star was the absolute ruler of the Peacock dynasty. If Fallen Star died, the building would definitely collapse. Although the 2 venerables' cultivation levels were far higher than Fallen Star's, they couldn't replace her. Whoosh! Granny Peacock stepped forward with a chain in her hand. It was only a venerable divine weapon. The Peacock clan no longer had Lianhua for her to use. However, she was an 8th venerable. Her cultivation level was far higher than Fallen Star's. The venerable divine weapon's power was comparable to that of Lianhua in her hands. The chain danced and turned into a wheel. Her goal wasn't to attack Fallen Star, but to block the plum blossom staff. Boom! Green light scattered in the air, and plum petals danced in the air. The venerable chain had blocked the plum blossom staff. At the same time, Granny Peacock grabbed Fallen Star and threw her behind. Barf! In the air, Fallen Star was already vomiting blood. Her body had already begun to crack. Her black robe had turned completely red. If Granny Peacock had been a step slower, she would have died. Since Granny Peacock had made her move, it would have caused a chain reaction. Old Peacock moved at the same time. His opponent was Sumo. Everything happened at the same time. The lotus vine in Sumo's hand shook and turned into a green whip that lashed at Old Peacock. Theoretically, there was a gap of 5 minor realms between him and Old Peacock. However, Sumo's artifact was even more powerful. The lotus vine flew out, and the bloody rose under Sumo's feet spread out. As for the Old Peacock, he shook his hand, and what he released were actually countless peacock feathers. It was a very ordinary immortal peacock art. As long as it was a peacock cultivator above the rebirth realm, they could use it. However, the same art was definitely different in the hands of Old Peacock. Each of the 5 colored feathers was 3 feet long. Each of them was like a 5-colored immortal sword. They shot out in the sky like countless crossbows. Sumo's lotus vine curled up. Green light filled the sky and instantly whipped away the feathers. They scattered in the sky like a star mist. However, the star mist glowed and instantly reformed. This was the difference between old peacock's art and other peacock art. Crack, crack. The lotus vine danced left and right like a dragon. Countless long feathers were whipped away. Whoosh, however, they gathered again in the air in an instant and formed a 5-colored spear that was dozens of feet long. It stabbed at Sumo. Although the spear was a Dharma art, its power was not inferior to a venerable divine weapon. Sumo shook her wrist and the lotus vine spun. Boom! The lotus vine scattered the 5-colored spear again. However, the 5-colored spear turned into feathers again. Sumo could not help but frown. Old Peacock's art was so difficult to deal with. As for Old Man Peacock, he couldn't help but look at Sumo with a cold smile. How could his art be ordinary? Hell flame! Sumo formed a seal with both hands. The blood-colored rose he released suddenly emitted a blood-colored light. Whoosh, whoosh! The blood-colored light and the black flame rose. They formed a red-black wall of fire in front of Sumo. The flame was dozens of feet tall and blocked the peacock's feathers. It was the combination of the dark art and the demon flower. Whoosh, whoosh, black smoke rose and dust filled the air. All the peacock's feathers were burned by Sumo's hellflame. In the first round, the two of them were evenly matched. As expected of the Galaxy Demon King, Old Peacock sneered and moved one hand. A ray of light suddenly flew out from his long sleeve. Whoosh! It was an ancient fan. The fan opened and 5-colored light shone. Countless peacocks flew out from the peacock fan, as well as countless 5-colored rocks. They rushed toward Sumo like a meteor shower. Lianbois! This was the Peacock clan's last Lianbois. Sumo sneered. He had already cast the Cosmos bag in the air. Chapter 832. The pouch could not absorb the Lianbois, but it could nullify its attack. The peacocks that flew out of the fan were a spell, but the Rainbow Mountain Rock was a physical object. It could not withstand the pouch's suction. Whoosh, clatter. The Rainbow Mountain Rock was absorbed by the pouch. The peacocks that flew over were entangled by the blood-colored roses and turned into smoke. Old Peacock was stunned. He did not expect Sumo to nullify his Lianbois spell so easily. When he looked again, the lotus vine in the void had already transformed into a long spear, charging straight at him. Each of Sumo's 3 Lianbois weapons was top grade. However, they were limited by Sumo's realm and could not unleash their full power. The lotus vine pierced through the air as a spear. When Old Man Peacock saw this, he immediately placed the peacock fan in front of him. It was as if a rainbow peacock had spread its tail. Boom, crack, the 2 Lianbois weapons collided. Light exploded and thunder rumbled. The peacock fan blocked the lotus vine's attack. However, the Old Man Peacock and Sumo both retreated. The power of the collision of the lotus treasures was something that even they had to avoid. He looked again and saw that a few nearby Peacock Mountain peaks had collapsed. Regardless of the outcome of this battle, the divine Peacock Mountain realm had suffered a great loss. Sumo and Old Peacock were in a stalemate. Neither could do anything to the other for a while. On the other side, Granny Peacock was also closing in on Uluo. Their situation was similar to Sumo's. Granny Peacock was also an 8th-layer venerable, but her treasures were far inferior to Uluo's. The two of them were testing each other. They did not attack recklessly. For a time, a delicate balance was formed in the air. Miss Yi, capture Fallen Star. I want her alive. Sumo yelled. Fallen Star was severely injured and her combat power was greatly reduced. Yi Wuhui had the Desolation's shadow. He could definitely capture Fallen Star. Before Sumo finished speaking, Yi Wuhui had already made his move. Because she already had the same intention. Protect Honorable Wang. Elder Peacock also shouted loudly. He was entangled by Sumo and had no chance to attack. However, there were still many reincarnation realm cultivators on Divine Peacock Mountain. Yi Wuhui was only at the third layer of the rebirth realm, and was nothing to be afraid of. Tens of cultivators from the Peacock Sacred Mountain immediately surrounded Yi Wuhui. They were all cultivators at the rebirth realm or above. After all, each of the 72 peaks of Divine Peafowl Mountain had its own rebirth realm. Just now, Yu Luo had only killed a portion of them. On paper, Fallen Star's side still had the absolute advantage. However, Yi Wuhui was wearing a blue dress and was standing on the demonic boat. She looked at the cultivators of Divine Peacock Mountain with a smile. Among these cultivators, there were a total of 3 who were at the 7th stage of Rebirth Realm. There were no less than 20 cultivators at the 5th or 6th level of Rebirth Realm. In theory, any one of them could suppress Yi Wuhui. At this moment, they surrounded Yi Wuhui like a pack of wolves eyeing a sheep. Kill! One of the 7th stage Rebirth Realm cultivators attacked first. It was a middle-aged cultivator. With a wave of his hand, an immortal sword appeared in his hand and pierced towards Yi Wuhui. His swordsmanship was definitely not weak among the Rebirth Realm cultivators. The aura of that sword was enough to make a 3rd stage Rebirth Realm cultivator tremble. Unfortunately, he had met Yi Wuhui. The corners of Yi Wuhui's mouth curled up as he patted his storage bag. Chi, a ray of red light flew out. It was a flying dagger that was no more than 3 inches long and as thin as a cicada's wing. It was the flying dagger that Sumo had given her. Yi Wuhui had named it the Regretless Flying Dagger. Today was the first time she had used it. The flying dagger should not be underestimated. It was a top-notch venerable divine weapon refined from the soul depository cauldron. Although it could not compare to the boundless Buddhalite, it was still extremely sharp. More importantly, the immortal sword in the hands of the first Rebirth Realm cultivator that charged towards Yi Wuhui was only a Rebirth Realm immortal sword. How could he kill Yi Wuhui then? The regretless flying dagger was extremely fast. Its speed was comparable to the speed of a 9th stage Rebirth Realm cultivator, not to mention a 7th stage Rebirth Realm cultivator. The 7th stage Rebirth Realm cultivator raised his eyebrows as he felt danger. However, it was all too late. Chi, a ray of red light directly broke his immortal sword. At the same time, he felt a slight chill in his chest. When he looked down, the 3-inch flying dagger had already pierced through his heart. At that moment, he did not even understand how he had died. Bang! With a thought from Yi Wuhui, the Rebirth Realm cultivator's body exploded. At the same time, the other Rebirth Realm cultivators swarmed forward. After all, they had the advantage in numbers. No matter how powerful Yi Wuhui was, how many could he kill? She was not a venerable. Buzz, however, at this moment, the demonic boat beneath Yi Wuhui's feet suddenly buzzed. In the void, there seemed to be layers of black waves continuously spreading outward. The demonic boat was an existence comparable to Lianhua. However, the peacock cultivators did not realize how dangerous it was. The black waves instantly spread over a radius of a few hundred feet. When the peacock cultivators stepped into the area of the black waves, they instantly felt their bodies turn sluggish. A strange force stuck all of them on the spot. The peacock cultivators' expressions changed. This was because they could feel that it was not pressure but a technique. However, there was one thing that was undeniable. The demonic boat did not know how to use technique. This technique must have been performed by Yi Wuhui. However, she was only a 3rd stage Rebirth Realm cultivator. Even if she used a magical treasure, how could she freeze dozens of Rebirth Realm cultivators in the void? Moreover, there were almighties whose realms were far higher than hers. This was somewhat unimaginable. However, Yi Wuhui did not give them too much time to think. Her with the regretless flying dagger leading the way, Yi Wuhui did not start a massacre. However, the cultivators who blocked her way to kill Xing Luo were all chopped down by her flying blade. A path of red light, a path of blood mist. Stepping on the demonic boat, Yi Wuhui charged past all the peacock cultivators and headed straight for Xing Luo. Everything happened in an instant. Whether it was the peacock cultivators, Xing Luo, or even the old man, none of them expected Yi Wuhui to break through the encirclement of the sacred peacock mountain cultivators so easily. One had to know that these cultivators were not ordinary cultivators. Any one of them could guard a small realm alone. Rebirth realm cultivators, even in the entire Yizong world, were first-class existences. However, Yi Wuhui, a third-stage rebirth realm cultivator, was able to enter unhindered. Sumo laughed coldly in her heart, because she knew that most of this was due to the shadow of desolation. It was just that the shadow was hidden in the dark and no one noticed it. After all, this was a chaotic battle. The two peacock ancestors did not dare to be distracted. Yi Wuhui flew over. Xing Luo raised an eyebrow. At this moment, although she was heavily injured and covered in blood, she had swallowed an immortal pill and believed that she could defeat a third-stage rebirth realm cultivator. Whoosh, she waved the peacock staff outwards. The power of the Lianbo was undeniable. The regretless flying dagger did not dare to face it head-on. However, the corner of Yi Wuhui's mouth curled up. He shouted, "Break!" Looking again, behind Yi Wuhui, a five-colored light shone. A rainbow-colored halberd appeared in the void. Xing Luo's expression suddenly changed. The Lianbo, the peacock halberd. That was her father's Lianbo. Boom! The peacock halberd and peacock staff collided in the void. Chapter 833. The peacock staff was more powerful than the peacock halberd. However, the heavily injured fallen star could no longer unleash its full power. On the other hand, the shadow of desolation was more than capable of controlling everything in the dark. As the saying went, one's loss is another's gain. Boom, crack. The peacock king's staff was sent flying by the peacock halberd, and fallen star's face instantly turned pale. Blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth once more. Yi Wuhui sneered and reached out with one hand to grab Fallen Star. Fallen Star's old injuries had yet to heal, and new ones were added. She seemed to be in a trance. Yi Wuhui was only at the third level of the rebirth realm. Normally, cultivators of this level were not even worth mentioning to Fallen Star. However, things were different today. Fallen Star had a feeling that she could summon Yu Yong and defeat Yi Wuhui. However, she did not expect him to use her father's Lianbo. Those were the ultimate treasures of the Peacock clan. When the Peacock King had fallen, the clan's strength had been greatly damaged. For more than 3 million years, if not for Fallen Star's efforts, the Peacock Astral would not have been in a relatively stable situation. The power of the peacock halberd in Yi Wuhui's hands was definitely beyond her realm. Fallen Star was an extremely intelligent person and should have realized what was going on, but the current situation was too dire. Fallen Star thought it was the shadow of desolation. When she looked again, Yi Wuhui opened one of his hands, and countless bluish-purple filaments spread out from his palm. Those thin threads were extremely long and thin antennae, strange and magical. Puppet threads. Fallen Star's expression changed. She had not known Yi Wuhui before, and had not even paid attention to him. After all, Yi Wuhui was only a third-level rebirth realm cultivator by Sumo's side. There were many third-level rebirth realm cultivators on the Divine Peacock Mountain. Therefore, Yi Wuhui did not attract Fallen Star's attention at all. However, the skill that Yi Wuhui performed at this moment shocked Fallen Star. That was because it was a pure puppet spell. In the entire Yizong world, the purest puppet techniques originated from the Corpseless sect. Corpseless sect. Xing Luo exclaimed inwardly. She was not afraid of Yi Wuhui, but she was in awe of the Corpseless sect. The Corpseless sect was known as the number 1 sect in Yizong. Its power seemed to cover the entire Yizong world. Even in the Sanskrit world, there were actually disciples of the Corpseless sect. The headmaster of the Corpseless sect, Taoist Corpseless, was a top-notch Lotus warrior. That was an existence that even the Prajna Lotus Venerable Starfall was afraid of. This blue-robed female cultivator actually came from the corpse-less sect. Fallen Star had never expected this. Moreover, judging from the technique, the blue-robed female cultivator should have a high status in the corpse-less sect. After all, the puppets in the corpse-less sect were controlled by extraordinary cultivators. Otherwise, they would have been controlled. Yi Wuhui was naturally a manipulator, not a manipulated one. Chi-chi. The purplish-blue thread shot toward Starfall at high speed. Fallen Star was not afraid of the gossamer puppet. This was because even the puppet techniques of Venerable Ones could not control Venerables. In a sense, Venerables were no longer puppets. Venerables would not become anyone's puppet. However, Yi Wuhui had once asked Bumiaotian about this law. Bumiaotian's answer was very interesting. He said that all puppet techniques were low-level existences. The real puppet techniques were about controlling people's minds. Yi Wuhui did not understand that sentence for many years. Now she understood a little. The difference between a cultivator and a puppet was actually just a thought. As long as one's technique was appropriate, any cultivator could become one's puppet. However, the definition of a puppet was slightly different. Naturally, Fallen Star did not have a deep understanding of puppet technique. However, she knew that Yi Wuhui's technique was useless against her. Yi Wuhui could not control her at all. Although she was seriously injured, she believed that she could still deal with Yi Wuhui. However, the moment the gossamer puppet flew toward her, she suddenly felt her body freeze. At the same time, she heard the cry of a peacock in her divine soul. She did not know who the cry belonged to. However, it was definitely the peacock's cry, and it was extremely ear-piercing. It sounded like an old peacock scolding a young peacock. Roar, roar. Each sound struck Fallen Star's heart. She suddenly felt that the world was spinning. It was a feeling that she did not even feel when she was seriously injured earlier. The peacock's cry echoed in her mind. Hee. Yi Wuhui looked at Fallen Star and smiled strangely. She looked again and saw that the gossamer puppet in Yi Wuhui's hand had disappeared in an instant. An illusion. Fallen Star's soul trembled. Yi Wuhui did not have the gossamer puppet in his hand. Instead, he was holding a talisman. The talisman was given to her by Sumo at the soul-storing altar. It was a supremacy talisman. Sumo had refined a total of 3 talismans like that. They could only be used once and were considered consumables. She had originally given them to Yi Wuhui to protect himself. She did not expect to use them today. Suppress. Yi Wuhui's voice was very soft, but it sounded like a clap of thunder to Fallen Star. Boom! Fallen Star's eyes were spinning. She stared at Yi Wuhui's talisman. She wanted to dodge it, and she even wanted to. However, she felt that she could not control her body. At that moment, it was like a nightmare. Somehow, a mysterious force suddenly pulled her back. Fallen Star was shocked again. Why was this happening? Yi Wuhui definitely did not have that kind of ability. Moreover, Yi Wuhui's talisman had not enveloped her. A strange feeling rose in her heart. At the same time, she finally saw an endless shadow extending from beneath her feet. Immortal power rippled within the shadow. The other end of the shadow was beneath Yi Wuhui's feet. The shadows beneath their feet were connected. The shadow had restrained her. Demonic shadow. Desolation's shadow. Fallen Star finally remembered the Desolation's shadow. It was an extremely special existence to the Prajna demons. It was not a supremacy, but it surpassed one. He possessed many of the Prajna demons' secret arts. He knew almost all of the Prajna demons' weaknesses. He was in the blue-robed female cultivator's shadow? Fallen Star could not believe it, but she had to. Peacock shriek. Broken shadow. Fallen Star recalled the 2 ancient secret arts of the peacock demons. She realized that Yi Wuhui's arts were all illusions. She had been affected by the demonic shadow's immortal art. Bang! In an instant, Yi Wuhui was already in front of Fallen Star. He gently placed his hand on her forehead. What she had done just now was a feint. However, this was definitely not the case. The Lord Suppression Talisman in Yi Wuhui's hand was firmly imprinted on the top of Fallen Star's head. Fallen Star shuddered. The light in her eyes suddenly dimmed. Her divine soul was completely sealed and fixed in the void. Meanwhile, the shadow beneath her feet was gradually receding as if nothing had happened. Fallen Star was captured. Boom! Old Peacock and Granny Peacock instantly unleashed their most powerful attacks. Chapter 834. Fallen Star was the Peacock King. Although her cultivation level was not the highest in the Peacock astral realm, she was the most important. Both Old Peacock and Granny Peacock saw that Fallen Star was sealed. At that moment, without any hesitation, they chose to give up on their opponents and return to help Fallen Star. However, they knew that neither Yuluo nor Sumo would give them a chance to escape easily. Therefore, they chose the most powerful spells. Granny Peacock was even more decisive and ruthless. She suddenly shook the chain in her hand, and the light on the chain shone brightly. Then, with a bang, it exploded. The explosion of a venerable divine weapon was no less powerful than a true cultivator at the 9th level of the rebirth realm. Without protection, even a normal venerable would not be able to withstand it. Yuluo did not expect Granny Peacock to be so decisive. Even for a venerable divine weapon was not easy to obtain. The chain was a top-grade divine weapon. Boom! When Granny Peacock detonated her divine weapon, the shock wave directly raised the surrounding mountains that had already collapsed to the ground. Some cultivators even died directly. Most of the force was directed at Yuluo. After all, Granny Peacock's goal was to get rid of Yuluo. Yuluo did not dare to face the explosion of a venerable divine weapon head-on. With a thought, the mystic yellow umbrella shone brightly and rotated in front of her. Boom, bang! The force of the explosion was completely dispelled by the mystic yellow umbrella's rotation and disappeared without a trace. However, Granny Peacock had indeed gotten rid of Yuluo at that moment. At the same time, Old Peacock also used his top-grade immortal spell. He quickly formed a hand seal. The Peacock fan went straight for Sumo, but it only made it easier for him to cast the spell. A ray of silver light shot out from between Old Peacock's brows. At the same time, his entire body was covered in silver light. This silver light was not among the 5-colored divine light. It was as if a heavenly eye had opened between Old Peacock's brows. Chi. As soon as the silver light appeared, it actually brought with it an extremely cold Chi. At that moment, the temperature of the entire divine Peacock mountain realm dropped. Everything within 100 miles turned into ice. At that moment, Suemo could not help but raise his eyebrows. If he had not seen the Peacock clan's ancestor with his own eyes, he would have thought that it was Murong Haiqing. The cold energy in the silver light was even stronger than Murong Haiqing's. 100-meter-tall wall of ice formed between the Peacock man and Suemo. It was towering like an iceberg. At the same time, Old Peacock hurriedly retreated toward Xing Luo. His goal was the same as Peacock. Unfortunately, Sumo was not Yuluo. Sumo's methods far surpassed Yuluo's. Suemo had been looking for a flaw in the Old Peacock. He needed a chance to kill the other party, but he didn't have one until now. At this moment, Old Man Peacock was in a hurry to save Xing Luo. A flaw appeared in his mind. Old Man Peacock's Silver Ice Immortal Technique was indeed a top-notch supremacy immortal technique, but it was impossible for it to stop Suemo. As soon as he shot out the silver light, the lotus vine in Sumo's hand burst into azure flames. Whoosh, boom. It was a perfect combination of immortal technique and lianbua. The azure flames were like a hammer. At that moment it was hard to tell which was more effective, the heat of the azure flames or the power of the lotus vine. The 100-meter-tall ice wall that had just been formed in the void collapsed with a loud rumble. Silver light flashed in the air like stars. On divine Peacock Mountain, snowflakes danced in the air like icicles. Amidst the icicles, old Peacock wanted to retreat, but Sumo was faster. With a flash of white, he used a mysterious footwork technique and stood between old Peacock and Xing Luo. At the same time, countless runes appeared under his feet. Seal! Sumo shouted. Old Peacock was an 8th layer venerable. In truth, his cultivation level was far above Sumo's. However, his expression changed when he saw the runes under Sumo's feet. The Forbidden Diagram Art. He had heard of the Forbidden Diagram Art. It was known as the #1 technique in the 3 realms. But wasn't that the legendary Holy Father Amu's technique? So the Demon King knew it too. Whoosh, whoosh, old Peacock's thoughts only lasted for an instant. All of a sudden, he felt the distance between him and Fallen Star widening. It was a very special feeling. He felt himself moving backward along with the Forbidden Diagram under Sumo's feet. Moreover, not only was space moving backward, but time seemed to be moving backward as well. This was because he saw his silver ice wall recovering, and all the silver light returned to his glabella. Everything that had happened earlier was completely reversed. He saw that the collapsed mountain peak had been restored. Time flew by, and he could even feel his white hair turning black. 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, everything felt like a dream. Time was moving backward rapidly. The distance between him and Sumo had never changed. Sumo was dressed in white. She stood not far from him with an enigmatic smile on her face. That smile was one of mockery. What was going on? What technique was that? Was it a lotus technique? The Demon King of the 3 realms could control time and space? This was unimaginable to old Peacock. Old Peacock felt that his cultivation level was rapidly declining. He watched helplessly as the Forbidden Diagram under his feet rippled like an ocean. He could not muster up any strength. He seemed to have been brought to a time and space of millions of years. Everything around him was changing. The only thing that did not change was Sumo. That white robe was in a fixed position in front of him. That was the most terrifying scene that old Peacock had ever seen since he started cultivating. His cultivation level was rapidly declining. 6th layer venerable, 4th layer venerable, 2nd layer venerable, hundreds of years of cultivation seemed to have been destroyed in a day. Was it an illusion? Everything in front of him seemed real and illusory at the same time. However, old Peacock had already sensed the immortal chi in his body flowing away. It was definitely not an illusion. The time and space around him were definitely changing. 1st layer venerable. His cultivation level was already below Sumo's. When he looked again, Sumo finally moved. With a shake of his hand, the lotus vine in his hand had turned into a bamboo pole. Then, Sumo stabbed forward with the bamboo pole. A green ray pierced through the air like a sword. At that moment, old Peacock really wanted to dodge. However, the power of the Forbidden Diagram was like a vine that entangled him. He could not move at all. His struggle was completely futile. Not only was his strength trapped, but his mind was also trapped. There was no cultivator who could remain indifferent to the fact that their cultivation base had suddenly fallen. That was because cultivation level was the meaning of their cultivation. Old Peacock's state of mind was already at a disadvantage. In fact, he did not know that Sumo was also reaching her limit. Now, they were competing to see who was more confident and whose will was stronger. Today, if old Peacock had reached the 9th layer venerable realm, Sumo's efforts would have been in vain. Luckily, he had the upper hand. Therefore, he had to act immediately. In another instant, his Forbidden Diagram would collapse. Chi chi chi. The bamboo pole pierced through the air with an electric arc puff. The bamboo pole directly pierced through old Peacock's head. Chapter 835. Poof! Bam! A venerable's head could almost turn into a world. Ancestor Peacock had cultivated for nearly 10 million years and was a true great cultivator. He might not be as strong as the venerables of the three realms, but he was still a peerless expert. Throughout the history of the Peacock clan, there were not many who were above the 8th level venerable realm. Before this, none of the cultivators of the divine Peacock Mountain had expected Sumo to kill Ancestor Peacock. After all, there was a difference of a few levels between them. Even if the Galactic Demon King was capable, how could he kill a venerable realm cultivator? It was not something that could be done with 1 or 2 pieces of lianbois. However, Sumo did it, and she did it cleanly. The moment Ancestor Peacock's head was pierced, the entire divine Peacock Mountain fell silent. Time seemed to have stopped at that moment. No one dared to believe what had happened. Ancestor Peacock stared blankly at Sumo. He died with his eyes wide open. He did not understand how Sumo had killed him. He was unwilling, but it was useless. On the divine Peacock Mountain, only Yi Wuhui knew what Sumo had done. The other cultivators only saw the runes under Sumo's feet, but they were not there, so they could not understand how Ancestor Peacock felt. They did not understand why Ancestor Peacock did not dodge Sumo's bamboo pole. Boom! At the same time, the forbidden map under Sumo's feet dissipated. Sumo could no longer extrapolate any further. What he did just now was his limit. In the world of the forbidden map, he had gone back millions of years. Roar! At that moment, Granny Peacock suddenly let out a peacock's cry. The two ancestors had accompanied each other for nearly 10 million years. She did not expect one of them to die today. Granny Peacock's white hair was flying wildly, and her eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. However, she restrained herself and did not charge at Sumo. Instead, she went straight for Yi Wuhui. Ancestor Peacock was dead, and Fallen Star could still be saved. Granny Peacock had not lost her mind. Everything happened in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. Granny Peacock screeched, her heart filled with grief and indignation, but she sped up instead. She was already not far from Yi Wuhui. In fact, with her cultivation base, she was completely capable of saving Fallen Star. Granny Peacock had made up her mind. She understood that with Old Man Peacock's death, they would definitely lose. Sumo was unfathomable. If he could kill Old Man Peacock, he would probably be able to kill him. As such, she had already made up her mind. As long as she could save Fallen Star, she would escape. As long as there's life, there's hope. There were many small worlds under the jurisdiction of the Peacock Astral. As long as they did not die here, there were many ways for them to escape. There were many venerables in the Hanya realm. In the future, she would unite the various races to kill Sumo. The Qilin and Kuan butterfly clans would definitely not sit idly by. After all, Sumo was not a Tibetan cultivator. But as long as she and Xing Luo existed, even if they lost Divine Peacock Mountain today, the Peacock tribe would not perish. Granny Peacock's idea was good, but the reality was cold. She had indeed arrived in front of Yi Wuhui. At this time, both Yu Luo and Sumo were still a distance away. In that instant she could accomplish many things. Looking again, Granny Peacock reached out with one hand. Her hand was a little withered, like the arm of a zombie, or more accurately, the claw of a bird. Her fingers were like hooks, shining faintly. This time, she grabbed Yi Wuhui's head. The hand of a venerable was enough to destroy the world. At that moment, she had already made up her mind to kill. Today, there were countless casualties on Divine Peacock Mountain, including dozens of rebirth cultivators. Just now, Old Man Peacock's soul had been destroyed. Half of the 72 main peaks of Divine Peacock Mountain had collapsed. It could be said that after this battle, the Peacock tribe's vitality was greatly damaged, and Divine Peacock Mountain was unrecognizable. Now, Granny Peacock could not kill Yu Luo, let alone Sumo. Therefore, all her hatred was concentrated on Yi Wuhui. How dare a rebirth cultivator in the 3rd level act so arrogantly? Sealing a venerable king in the third level of the rebirth realm? This was a great humiliation to the Peacock tribe. Die! Granny Peacock's eyes were filled with hatred, and she gritted her teeth. She had to kill Yi Wuhui. At this time, it was too late for Yi Wuhui to dodge. Although she had a demonic boat under her feet, Granny Peacock was extremely fast. She did not give Yi Wuhui a chance. However, Yi Wuhui only smiled coldly, his eyes showing no fear. First, she was not afraid of death. This time, she had accompanied Sumo to find Plum Blossom 5. They had agreed that Plum Blossom 5 would leave when he found her. Now, if she died to help Sumo, it would be a kind of ending. Second, she still had a trump card. The shadow of famine was in her shadow. Unless the shadow of famine died, she would definitely be safe. As long as the shadow of famine could block Granny Peacock for a moment, it would be fine. In fact, that was indeed the case. Granny Peacock had come in anger. She had not thought about why Yi Wuhui had stopped Fallen Star in her tracks. She had been too busy fighting Yu Luo to pay attention to her. She had thought that Fallen Star's injuries were too severe. She had seen the peacock halberd, but she had thought that Yu Luo had lent it to Yi Wuhui. She was not very clear about the details of the battle with the Peacock King. Thus, she had not expected Yi Wuhui to have a top-notch assassin on him, and a true demonic assassin at that. Whoosh, the 5 fingers fell, unable to be stopped. Just when everyone from the Peacock tribe thought that Yi Wuhui was dead for sure, and even Yu Luo turned pale with fright, a 5-colored radiance suddenly shone from Yi Wuhui's head. The radiance was dazzling and incomparably resplendent. A peacock crown appeared on Yi Wuhui's head. The crown was adorned with the feathers of a peacock, and it was a dazzling sight. The Peacock King's plume. It was a lianbua of the same level as the Peacock King's scepter. It was originally enshrined on Divine Peacock Mountain, and the Peacock King had brought it down the mountain just in case. Who would have thought that it would be left outside? Granny Peacock's expression changed the moment the Peacock King plume appeared. But she could not stop her attack now. Boom, crack, her claw landed squarely on the Peacock King plume. A venerable's claw was indeed powerful, but it was not powerful enough to fight a lianbua barehanded. In an instant, blood filled the sky. Granny Peacock's hand was mangled by the Peacock King plume. Moreover, a black shadow had already appeared under the Peacock King plume. It was Desolation's shadow. He formed a seal with both hands and blocked above Yi Wuhui's head. At the same time, 4 wings extended from his back, like the wings of a butterfly. Each of the wings was flowing with immortal qi, and at the same time, they were emitting 5-colored light. Kuan Butterfly Immortal Art. In the entire Wisdom Realm, other than the Kuan Butterfly Venerables, only Desolation's shadow could use this art. It was the Kuan Butterfly race's secret art. Whoosh, Desolation's shadow flapped its wings again. Endless black wind swept across the sky. Granny Peacock, who had already been injured by the Peacock King plume, could not help but retreat. The wind of the Kuan Butterfly could destroy souls. Although Desolation's shadow could not kill her, she had to retreat. Just as she was about to retreat, Yu Luo was already behind her. Yu Luo flicked her wrist. Puff, a green light flashed. The plum blossom staff pierced through Granny Peacock's immortal heart. Chapter 836. In the blink of an eye, 2 Stage 8 Venerables had fallen. This was not only a fatal blow to the Peacock clan, but it would also affect the entire Prajna realm. The structure of the Prajna realm might change because of this. 3 million years ago, the Peacock King was subdued. The Peacock clan's strength was greatly reduced. Later on, Fallen Star worked hard and finally stabilized the situation. She also became a venerable. Even so, the Peacock Astral was the weakest among the 3 demon clans. Today, 2 of their ancestors had fallen. The Peacock clan might not be able to make a comeback. At this moment, the Peacock Divine Mountain was still unaware of the situation in their astral realm. The Qilin and Peacock astral realms were already at each other's throat. After Sumo and Yulua left, the Eagle King finally agreed to the Qilin lady's promise. He was willing to submit to the Qilin clan. Therefore, he immediately sent his subordinates across the Star Desert Sea. This was because speed was the most important thing in such matters. Otherwise, it would be troublesome. What he didn't expect was that his subordinates never returned. Because there was no such thing as the Qilin clan. The Qilin Cloud Realm already knew about the fall of Long Banlin and Qilin Lady. They also knew that the South Unicorn Duke and the 3,000 Black Unicorn Army had fallen in the Star Desert Sea. Everything pointed to the Peacock clan. Therefore, the Cloud Realm was furious. The Qilin King ordered the South Unicorn Star Region's army to attack the Peacock Astral Realm. Therefore, the Eagle King's subordinates were killed as scouts in the Star Desert Sea. The Eagle King's subordinates also wanted to explain. But their words were simply nonsense to the Qilin clan's ears. The Qilin Lady and the South Unicorn Duke's souls had disappeared. How could they recruit the Eagle King? The Eagle King's envoy was definitely up to no good. The Qilin clan's army crossed the Star Desert Sea. The Eagle King had no choice but to fight. However, he would not choose to fight to the death. If he could not stop the Qilin clan, he would naturally flee. The Peacock Astral Realm and the Qilin clan were facing the same problem. The Qilin Cloud Realm did not realize that there was something fishy about the fall of Long Banlin and Qilin Lady. That was because Fallen Star did not seem to have that ability. There seemed to be a driving force behind the whole thing. However, they didn't think of Yulua or Sumo. Instead, they thought of the Kuan butterfly. This was because the one that benefited the most from the battle between the Qilin and the Peacock was the Kuan butterfly. However, the Qilin Astral Realm had been eyeing the Peacock Astral Realm for a long time. Even if the Kuan butterfly had other intentions, they decided to take down the Peacock Astral first. After all, the fall of the two venerables was enough to give the Qilin clan a reason to launch an all-out attack on the Peacock Astral. What's more, the Almighties of the Qilin Cloud Realm had their own plans for taking down the Peacock Astral Realm. On the Qilin Cloud World, there were still 3 venerables. Now, they had all left the Cloud Realm and were heading straight for the Peacock Star Realm. This time, they wanted to gather the power of the Qilin Astral and annex the Peacock Astral in one fell swoop. Then, they would strive to fight against the Kuan Butterfly clan. Of course, this news had yet to reach the Peacock Divine Mountain. At this time, the battle at Divine Peafowl Mountain was nearing its end. Now that the 2 great patriarchs of Peafowl Mountain had fallen, there was no cultivator left who could resist Sumo and Yulua. The shadow of famine had already returned to Yi Wuhui's shadow. Xing Luo's face was pale as she watched her 2 patriarchs die. Unfortunately, she was immobilized by the Guardian Suppression Talisman. She knew that the situation was hopeless. Actually, Fallen Star was good at scheming and strategizing. However, she had never thought that such a day would come. She never thought that Yulua would return alive and bring strong reinforcements to the Divine Mountain. She also never thought that the 2 patriarchs of the Peafowl clan would fall at the same time. In her opinion, as long as it wasn't the Lotus Warriors, the entire Divine Mountain would be impregnable. Even if the Kuan Butterfly clan came, she wouldn't be afraid. However, under the combined efforts of Yulua, Sumo, and the Shadow of Famine, the Divine Mountain collapsed in a single night. Fallen Star had overestimated the power of the Peafowl clan. At this time, there were still tens of thousands of cultivators on the Divine Mountain. There were more than 30 Rebirth Realm cultivators. In fact, with this kind of strength, they could sweep through many worlds. In fact, as long as Sumo and the others retreated, they could easily maintain their rule over the entire Peacock Astral. However, the problem was that the Peafowl clan no longer had a top-level force to hold down the fort. Even if Sumo and Yulua didn't kill Fallen Star, she couldn't do much on her own. The Qilins and Kuan butterflies were eyeing the Peafowl clan covetously. In front of Yulua and Suemo, these reincarnation realm cultivators weren't even worth mentioning. In fact, Sumo and Yuluo didn't even need to do anything. The shadow of famine alone could control all the monsters on the Divine Mountain. Sumo and Yuluo walked up to Fallen Star. Fallen Star, how do you feel now? Yuluo pointed at Fallen Star with the plum blossom staff in her hand. The plum blossom staff seemed to carry the aura of death of Nine-Tailed Raccoon and Granny Peacock. Heh heh heh. Fallen Star's eyes were bloodshot, but she could still sneer. I feel great, Yuluo. Even though Black Raccoon is dead, I've been with him for millions of years, day and night. The Patriarch is dead, but I once controlled the entire Peacock Astral. Today, my darkness will only last for an instant, but you must have waited for millions of years to return to the Divine Mountain. Ha ha ha. Fallen Star looked at Yuluo and laughed. It seems like your pain is far greater than mine. Your plum blossom is dead and cannot be resurrected, but I can follow Black Raccoon and the Patriarch. You're the pitiful one. Fallen Star was a little deranged, but Yuluo looked at her coldly, unmoved. She understood that this was the only way Fallen Star could find peace in her heart. Where's Mu Hongchen? Sumo took a step forward. Mu Hongchen? Fallen Star looked at Sumo coldly. Demon King, I forgot. You've been separated from the Plum Blossom sprite for a long time. I heard that she went through many reincarnations in order to meet you and wake you up. Why haven't you met her yet? It's a pity that Xiao Huang is dead. Your family will never be able to reunite again. Fallen Star's words were like a dagger, stabbing straight into Sumo's soul. However, Sumo's lips curled up and he said to Fallen Star, do you want to die quickly? Hee, that's just wishful thinking. Don't worry, we won't kill you. Wouldn't that be letting you off easy? Fallen Star raised an eyebrow at Sumo's words. You call me the Demon King. Sumo looked at Fallen Star and raised his right hand. A black aura appeared in his palm. Have you forgotten that I'm actually the Dark Lord of the Three Realms? ZZT. The black aura circled around his palm, and a little black worm gradually appeared. It looked like a ladybug, but it was completely black. None of the cultivators present recognized the little worm. The Dark Lord of the Three Realms is the most tolerant and ruthless supremacy in the Three Realms. Sumo let the little black worm crawl onto his index finger. I'm least afraid of wasting time. Fallen Star, do you believe me? I can make your life a living hell for countless years. You'll suffer physical and mental torture day and night. You'll beg for death. Your suffering must be more than mine, Yuluo's, Xiao Huang's, Wu Er's, or anyone else's. With that, Sumo pointed with one finger. Whoosh! The little black worm was shot straight into Fallen Star's forehead. Dark worm, devour the body and devour the soul. Sumo's words were gentle, and there was even a smile on his face. Whoosh, however, black worms crawled all over Fallen Star's beautiful face in an instant. They were so densely packed that it sent chills down one's spine. Chapter 837. The Nether Worm was a nether corpse worm. It came from the nether realm, formed from the resentment of the corpses. The black worm could eat away at the body and soul without rest. Usually, Sumo wouldn't use it. It was too cruel because it wasn't necessary. However, Xing Luo's words made him choose to release the worms. Sizzle, squeak. The worms themselves didn't make any sound. But now they covered Xing Luo's face. The sound seemed to be the sound of them rubbing against each other, or gnawing at Xing Luo's body. Divine Peacock Mountain fell into a deathly silence once more. Yuluo's consciousness had already covered the entire mountain. Every blade of grass, every tree, and every movement on the mountain was within her observation. Some cultivators in the distance tried to escape, but Yuluo's feathers pierced their hearts as soon as they took a step. Kill all who move. Yuluo's cold voice echoed throughout the mountain. At the same time, she grabbed with one hand and turned a cultivator at level 5 of rebirth next to her into dust. It was a peacock. No one dared to move now. The entire Divine Peacock Mountain was like a dead mountain. Almost all the cultivators stared at Xing Luo. Instantly, Xing Luo's face was gone. Her beautiful face was no longer there. Her noble blue hair had turned into nothingness. Her head had already become a skull. Xing Luo was a level 2 venerable, the Peacock Queen. But at this moment, her black skirt was fluttering, revealing a skull. She wasn't dead, but she looked terrifying. The worms were only gnawing at her body. Sizzle, squeak, all the peacock cultivators paled, because they could only watch helplessly as their queen was eaten by the vile insects. A few rebirth cultivators couldn't take it anymore. They wanted to struggle and even self-detonate, but Yu Luo or Desolation's shadow held them in place. Similarly, they could neither live nor die. "Tell me, where is Wu Er?" Sumo asked coldly as she looked at Xing Luo's skull. He. Fallen Star's body trembled slightly as she forced out her voice. "Demon King, don't even think about getting any information from me." When Sumo heard this, the black light in her eyes froze. In an instant, the smile on his face deepened. "Fallen Star, very good." Sumo waved her hand. Looking again, the nether insects began to crawl downward. They were densely packed together. Fallen Star was wearing a black dress. At this moment, the clothes on her upper body were instantly devoured. Her skin was as white as snow, exposed to the outside, but everything was aflash. Her creamy skin was crawling with black worms. Her fair skin festered instantly. Amidst the festering, black worms wriggled. That kind of feeling made one's entire body go numb and their scalp go numb. The sound of the nether worms chewing was not loud, but it was clearly transmitted into everyone's ears. The nether worms seemed to be gnawing at everyone's hearts. Wah, wretch! Some cultivators from Divine Peacock Mountain who did not have enough willpower were already injured and vomiting. On the demonic arc, Yuwuhui raised an eyebrow, then gently turned around. Yulua's brows were tightly furrowed. It was true that she hated Fallen Star, but she only wished for her death. She could not bear to see such a torture. However, she would not stop Sumo. Yulua turned around as well. Sumo did not turn around. His expression was calm and demonic, because he knew in his heart that only one could understand the pain of others. Wu Er's pain was no less than anyone else's. Many reincarnations, generations of searching. Who could understand that kind of pain and suffering? Fallen Star's pain was merely physical torture, and it was only shown to everyone. That was why she appeared so miserable. However, how many people in the world suffered unbeknownst to others? What they saw was suffering, but what they could not see was not suffering. To Sumo that was laughable logic. Therefore, it was not that his heart was as cold as a stone, but that he could see everything more thoroughly. He did not care what the cultivators thought of him. The Demon King of the Galaxy, the Nether Lord of the Three Realms. Sumo no longer cared about his reputation. He would only do what he thought was right. The Peacock clan had hurt him first. How could he be merciful? Therefore, there was no pity in Sumo's eyes. There was only calmness. He watched as the nether worms gnawed on Fallen Star layer by layer. He did not feel any psychological burden. Sumo was smiling, but his heart was as heavy as the sea. The black dress disappeared, and Fallen Star's body, which was covered by the nether worms, could still be vaguely seen. However, those black worms definitely did not know how to flirt. They had no thoughts. To them, Fallen Star was a piece of meat, and it might even be rotten meat. Fallen Star's consciousness was very complete. She could feel countless worms crawling on her body, and she could hear them gnawing on her flesh. However, she gritted her teeth and suppressed everything with unimaginable willpower. Her head was only left with a skeleton. Therefore, the so-called gritting of her teeth turned into a kind of terrifying chattering. At this time, it was not only her teeth that were chattering, but her entire body. This kind of trembling was not something the current Fallen Star could control. She was like a person who had just crawled out of bone-chilling water into a world of ice and snow. No matter how strong her will was, she could not control the trembling. Demon! Monarch! You! Fallen Star wanted to curse Sumo fiercely, but she could not even say Sumo's name. That kind of pain was indescribable. It was not just physical torture, but also mental torture. The others could not bear to look at it, let alone Fallen Star. This was torture. From head to toe, Fallen Star's flesh was completely devoured. The nether worms began to corrode her internal organs, but Fallen Star's sea of consciousness and immortal heart were covered by a ball of azure light. That way, she would not die. A moment later, the nether worms had completely turned Fallen Star into a skeleton. At that moment, Fallen Star was completely speechless. She was using all her willpower to resist the nether worms. Sumo's expression did not change. The nether worms had already begun gnawing on her bones. They burrowed in through the cracks in Fallen Star's bones, bit through them, and crawled out. The pain must have penetrated deep into her bones. Moments later, Fallen Star began to moan in pain. She could not help but scream. This was because all of her senses were complete. Although she could still endure the pain, she had already reached her limit. Fallen Star's skeletal body was being devoured. It was riddled with holes like a beehive. Countless Prajna demons, the future demon king of the galaxy, were horrified at the sight. Fallen Star's soul was the only thing left in the air. She drifted about. At this moment, as long as Sumo willed it, he could destroy her soul. However, Sumo did not do so, nor did he ask her anything. It was as if Sumo no longer wanted to know Wu-Er's whereabouts. He only wanted to torture Fallen Star. Yiwuhui could not help but glance at Sumo, but hesitated to speak. She could see Sumo's pitch-black eyes. There was a smile on Sumo's face, but even Yiwuhui felt a chill run down her spine. At that moment, he did not seem to be the Sumo she knew. He was a demon who had returned from the netherworld. Sizzle. Green smoke rose from the sky. The nether worms had begun to devour Fallen Star's soul. Ah! Finally, the soul-piercing pain caused Fallen Star to let out a shrill scream of agony. In that moment, the dignity of a venerate and the nobility of a queen were all beaten to the ground by Sumo. Sumo trampled Fallen Star to the ground. Sigh. A long sigh came from outside Divine Peafowl Mountain. The Demon King's hatred had exceeded many people's imagination. This time, if there was no news of Wu-Er, Sumo would not give up. Chapter 838. Ah! Fallen Star's screams rang out incessantly. Her voice reverberated throughout Divine Peacock Mountain. Almost every peacock cultivator paled. They were afraid, angry, hateful, and resentful. But there was nothing they could do. The Peacock Queen's torture was equivalent to beating the entire Peacock clan to the ground. That was truly a form of torture, and even more so a form of humiliation. Fallen Star screamed but did not beg for mercy. It had to be said that this woman hated others because she had forced her own sister to death with her own hands, but she was also cruel to herself. Although she screamed as her body and soul were devoured, she did not beg for mercy. At that moment, everyone knew that Sumo would stop as long as Fallen Star spoke. However, Fallen Star did not speak. She would rather endure everything. This was a standoff. Who would outlast the other? Yiwuhui looked at Sumo and called out softly, "Sumo." However, Sumo shook his head coldly. Yiwuhui sighed lightly and didn't say anything. Neither did Fallen Star. No one could stop Sumo now. Sumo stood in the air. He was dressed in white, his black hair flying in the wind. There was not a trace of sorrow on his beautiful face. There was only demonic intent in his eyes. It was an expression rarely seen on Sumo since his reincarnation. It had only appeared on the Dark Lord's face. Fallen Star's soul was already extremely faint, but Sumo very cleverly maintained a kind of balance. Fallen Star's soul hovered between destruction and destruction, but it would not be severed. Whoosh! The corners of Sumo's mouth twitched. He waved his hand again. Some of the worms on Fallen Star's body suddenly flew away. In an instant, one turned into 10, 10 into 100, and 100 into millions. A black tornado seemed to form on Divine Peacock Mountain. Fear filled the eyes of all the cultivators. What was the Galaxy Demon King doing? Sumo's cold voice echoed throughout Divine Peacock Mountain. Worms, destroy all the monsters on Divine Peacock Mountain. Hum, those black insects actually grew wings, and they were like black locusts, covering the sky and covering the earth. However, they were 10,000 times scarier than locusts. No, at this moment, there were already reincarnation realm cultivators shouting with their eyes wide open. They were the closest to Starfall. In an instant, those reincarnation state cultivators who were frozen in the void were directly covered by the endless dark worms. In the void, dozens of reincarnation cultivators were covered by a black cloak. It was just that this coat was constantly moving. At the same time, helpless howls accompanied them. There was only one fallen star. In the entire Peacock clan, there wasn't a single cultivator with the same mental fortitude as Xing Luo. Even Xing Luo was howling in pain as her soul was being devoured, let alone the other cultivators. As soon as the nether worms started to devour their bodies, they could no longer bear it. They had just witnessed the process of Fallen Star being devoured with their own eyes. Therefore, from the very beginning, their psychological defenses had collapsed. For a time, miserable screams rose and fell on the Peacock Divine Mountain. The many tragic scenes made it seem like hell. With the exception of Xing Luo, there was no need for Sumo to keep the other cultivators. Kill. However, they were being slowly devoured by the dark worms instead of dying quickly. Death was not the scariest thing. The process of death was the scariest. At this moment, the smile on Sumo's face gradually disappeared. At that moment, he was an absolute demon. Yiwuhui and Yulu were somewhat shaken. Yulu's hatred was actually no less than Sumo's. She was also prepared to destroy the Peacock clan, but she would not use such a method. The entire Divine Peacock Mountain's demon race will pay for the Shao family's vengeance. Sumo's voice was devoid of any emotion. At the same time, he patted his storage bag. Whoosh, a red-clothed puppet flew out of Sumo's storage bag. The crimson puppet. Yi Wuhui and Desolation's shadow had seen the crimson puppet before. However, after Sumo's refinement, the puppet had reached the peak of the 9th level of the Rebirth realm. Originally, Sumo had not used it, but now Sumo had summoned it. From this, one could see that Sumo's hatred was exploding. Crimson, burn Divine Peacock Mountain. Sumo's words were like an oracle. Whoosh, Crimson did not hesitate. In an instant, wings sprouted from his back. The blood-red wings spread for hundreds of feet. Then, he flapped his wings and swept up an endless fire. Crimson's fire was naturally not ordinary fire. He emitted faint purple flames. Each flame was hundreds of feet long. They flew like lightning towards the peak. The Divine Peafowl Mountain had 72 main peaks, and the rest of the peaks were innumerable. In truth, Divine Peacock Mountain was a special little star. It was the core of Divine Peacock Mountain. Crimson's wings flapped. Faint purple flames engulfed the entire Divine Peacock Mountain. At that moment, everyone witnessed the ruthlessness and decisiveness of the Galaxy Demon King. Sumo was like an emotionless creature. He wanted to completely erase Divine Peacock Mountain from the Wisdom Realm. Moreover, he wanted to erase it through endless torture. Fallen Star howled, but she could see it all with her own eyes. However, Sumo did not ask Fallen Star about Wu Er's whereabouts. Divine Peacock Mountain was hell on earth. All the cultivators felt like they were about to become vengeful ghosts. At that moment, Desolation, who had seen countless spectacles, sighed inwardly. He had once thought himself cruel enough, but compared to Sumo, he was nothing. Fallen Star was still holding on. However, when she saw the destruction of Divine Peacock Mountain with her own eyes, and the Yao race suffering at the hands of the netherworms, her will began to waver. Sumo's methods were too cruel and inhumane. Fallen Star's emotions were indescribable. If she could, she would drink Sumo's blood and give birth to Sumo's flesh, but her hatred would still not be appeased. Alas, that was impossible. Whoosh, whoosh. Fallen Star watched everything with a stupefied expression. Her heart was filled with hatred, but her emotions were also somewhat complicated. Thus, she released her 5 colored feathers. She gave all the true peacock cultivators a quick death. Her feathers fluttered as she silently prayed for Mei Lang. Today, her wish was finally fulfilled. However, Xiao Huang was dead and could not be resurrected. Fallen Star's heart was empty. Half of Divine Peacock Mountain had been set ablaze. By now, the entire Divine Peacock Mountain realm was aware of the situation. The 270 planets in the surroundings were guarded by mighty beings who were watching over everything. Many warships floated millions of miles outside Divine Peacock Mountain. Previously, they had been prepared to rescue them. Now, however, none of them dared to enter Divine Peacock Mountain realm. The raging flames exuded an intense supremacy's aura. If they entered, they would die. Divine Peacock Mountain was like an interstellar torch, burning fiercely. Demon, Lord. Fallen Star's voice finally came. She had decided to beg for mercy. Not for herself, but for Divine Peacock Astral Realm. Sumo was a madman, a demon. He could really do anything. But, just at this moment, a sigh finally came from above Divine Peacock Mountain, followed by a voice. Demon King of the Galaxy, that's enough. Stop. Whoosh, when he looked again, the sky was suddenly filled with endless light. The light instantly suppressed the flames on Divine Peacock Mountain. Then, a lotus platform descended from the sky. Chapter 839. Divine Peafowl Mountain was in imminent danger. Fallen Star's resistance had stimulated Sumo's demonic intent. He had decided to destroy the entire Divine Mountain. His murderous aura surged for thousands of miles. The combination of the Netherworms and Crimson Child was enough to destroy everything. There was nothing on Divine Peafowl Mountain that could stop them. It was a scene of hell and the end of the world. However, at that moment the void shone brightly. At the same time, the fragrance of the lotus was refreshing. The faint purple flames of Divine Peafowl Mountain suddenly dimmed. They turned into wisps of flame. It was an extremely powerful force that instantly suppressed Crimson Child's flames. At the same time, the netherworms that were wreaking havoc on Divine Peafowl Mountain stopped squirming. However, almost all of the monster cultivators on Divine Peafowl Mountain had changed beyond recognition. They were neither human nor ghost. The gnawing of the netherworms was no ordinary injury. Even reincarnated cultivators would have to spend tens of thousands of years to recover, and scars might be left behind. Cultivators of even lower realms might suffer the same fate for the rest of their lives. However, the cultivators who were still alive were already extremely lucky. The lotus platform glowed, illuminating the world. In an instant, the surroundings became peaceful and peaceful. However, at that moment, Sumo felt an unprecedented pressure. In an instant, Sumo's mind moved, and the yin-yang bell flew out of his cosmos bag. The yin-yang bell trembled slightly, dispelling the pressure from before. The ancient bell hung in the air above Sumo's head. The 9-tiered lotus platform was formed from a real lotus. The fragrance of the lotus spread and white light flowed. The lotus platform floated above Fallen Star's head, its radiance dispersing the netherworms on her soul. Strands of Fallen Star's soul could scatter at any time. A lotus petal fell from the lotus platform and caught Fallen Star's soul. Lotus. Venerate Fallen Star's divine soul eyes lit up slightly. However, she could only force herself to speak. Then, she curled up on the lotus petal. At this moment, Fallen Star's divine soul could not even float. She had been suspended in the air because of the netherworm's power. Lotus venerate? Xing Luo's words made Sumo and the others' expressions change. Sumo raised his head slightly and looked at the lotus platform, because it was right in front of him. The 9-layered lotus platform was solemn and dignified. Sumo had seen many lotus platforms. Miao Long-er and Han Bingyi both had their own lotus seat. Yizong cultivators liked to refine lotus platforms, so almost all great cultivators had their own lotus platforms. Sumo also had a lotus seat in her storage bag. However, this was the first time Sumo had seen a lotus platform with such a powerful aura that made people feel reverence. At this moment, if it weren't for the fact that Sumo's mind was strong and that she had so many Lianbo protecting her, she would have probably worshipped it. The other cultivators of divine Peafowl Mountain were already kneeling, as long as they could. Yuluo and Yi Wuhui stood behind Sumo. It was relatively safe under the yin-yang bell. She looked again and saw a person sitting cross-legged on the lotus platform. When she heard his voice and saw his entrance, Sumo thought that he must be a mighty cultivator. However, she didn't know that the person sitting on the lotus platform was a person who looked like a child. He looked no more than 13 or 14 years old. His face was powdery and his lips were red. His bones were clean and his spirit was refreshed. He wore a green and white Taoist robe, held a bamboo flute in his hand, and carried a horsetail whisk on his back. The bamboo flute and horsetail whisk looked ordinary, but they were definitely not ordinary objects. He was clearly a Taoist child. If he hadn't been sitting on the lotus platform, no one would have connected him to the Lotus Venerable that Xing Luo had mentioned. Lotus Venerable? Sumo narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. This could be considered his first time facing a Lotus Venerable in the truest sense. Sumo really couldn't see through the child's realm. In his eyes, the child's immortal aura was restrained, and he had no realm at all. He was no different from a mortal. Demon King, it's an honor to meet you. The Lotus Venerable looked like a child, but his voice sounded old. Although he was looking at Suemo with a faint smile on his face and his words were very polite, he seemed to be looking down on Suemo as he sat on the lotus throne. A Lotus Venerable was an existence that was one level higher than a supremacy. Above the supremacy was a Lotus Venerable. Who are you? Sumo was on high alert. To be honest, the Lotus Venerable gave Sumo a lot of pressure. He had only experienced the same feeling from AMU back in the Three Realms. However, Sumo was a peak Nether Venerable back then, comparable to a Lotus Venerable. I am Lotus Venerable Lucidum. The spirit child, the Lotus Venerable, said. Greetings, Senior Lucidum. Sumo has been disrespectful. Sumo cupped his fists at the spirit child. I wonder what brings you here today, Senior? Lucidum chuckled. Demon King, I'm only here for the peacock race. I know a thing or two about the grudge between you and the peacock race. Everything that happened just now was under my observation. Revenge breeds revenge. When will it end? Today, you almost destroyed the peacock race and divine Peacock Mountain. I think it's time to stop here. Whether it's hatred or resentment, what you've done today should be enough to resolve it, right? Lucidum was sitting on the lotus platform, but he sounded like he was negotiating. At that moment, Xing Luo, who was prostrating on the lotus petal, could not help but feel shocked. Actually, she had hoped that the Lotus Venerable would come to save her. After all, the Lotus Venerable was the one who sealed Mu Hongqian back then. When the Lotus Venerable appeared just now, she thought that everything would be reversed. However, she did not expect the Lotus Venerable's tone to exceed her expectations. There were only 2 Lotus Venerables in the Prajna realm, Xianlian and Lucidum. Legend had it that they came from the same sect. Xianlian was the senior sister, and Lucidum was the junior brother. However, even the Venerables in the Prajna realm had never seen Xianlian. Lotus Venerables were gods in the hearts of cultivators. In the past tens of thousands of years, Only Lucidum had seen the venerables. To ordinary cultivators, the Lotus Venerable was just a myth. He did not exist at all. However, Rebirth and venerable cultivators knew that the Lotus Venerable had always been around. Lucidum looked like a child, but he had cultivated for thousands of years. He was a true old monster. For tens of thousands of years, his attitude toward the venerables of the demon race was not as polite as it was to Sumo today. To a Lotus Venerable, a venerable could be destroyed with a wave of his hand. Even though Sumo had many Lianbo protecting her, she was definitely no match for Lucidum. Therefore, Xing Luo's heart sank. She understood that the matter today was not as simple as it seemed. Lucidum and the Lotus Venerable would not talk nonsense with Sumo for no reason. In terms of realm, the current Sumo did not have the qualifications for Lucidum to treat him like this. Hee. After hearing Lucidum's words, Sumo could not help but laugh. He had the same thoughts as Xing Luo. Lucidum must have some misgivings about him. Otherwise, he would not have acted like this. I dare not disobey Senior's words. However, my request has yet to come to fruition. As long as my request is satisfied, I will be willing to give it to you. As long as my request is fulfilled, I will listen to Senior's arrangements. Sumo said. What request does the Demon King have? Lucidum asked. Sumo looked at Lucidum and thought to herself, why do you ask when you already know the answer? My request is to destroy the peacock race for revenge, and to reunite with my wife, Sumo said slowly. What do you think, Lotus Venerable? Chapter 840. Destroy the Peacock Clan and reunite with Wu Air. Sumo's requests sounded simple, but it wasn't easy to fulfill them. Thus, when Sumo said those words, Lucidum's eyes flashed. He appeared to stop Sumo from destroying the Peacock Clan. After all, the Peacock Clan was still useful. If he destroyed the Peacock Clan and allowed Sumo to find the Plum Blossom sprite, then what was the point of him appearing? Demon King, if I could fulfill your two requests, then why would I need to appear? Although Lucidum's tone was calm, he was slightly dissatisfied that he called himself the Demon King. Hee. Sumo laughed. Originally, there was indeed no need for revered Lotus to appear. I could settle everything myself. Lucidum raised his eyebrows. He still looked like a child, but at this moment, he had the air of an old man. Sumo's words were like a needle in a silk floss. Her meaning was obvious. No one asked you to appear, so what if you do? Aren't you being redundant? As expected of the Galaxy Demon King. Lucidum's self-restraint was not bad. He suppressed his anger and smiled. You are right. But since I am here, this happened in my world, then I have to take care of it. How will revered Lotus take care of it? Sumo looked at Lucidum. A life for a life, a debt must be paid. My son, Xiao Huang, was chased to death by the Peacock Clan. My wife's reincarnation was sealed by the Peacock Clan's altar. I was once chased by Nine-Tailed Raccoon and almost lost my life. All of this is the truth. So what's wrong with me coming here to seek revenge and find my wife? There's nothing wrong with it. Lucidum nodded. As for the Plum Blossom sprite, I will show you the way. As long as you do as I say, it shouldn't be difficult for you to reunite with your wife. Sumo narrowed his eyes. Because he felt that there was a hidden meaning in Lucidum's words. What do you mean by pointing out the right path? Wasn't it the Prajna Lotus warrior who sealed Wu Air? Nine-Tailed Raccoon, who had been pursuing me all those years ago, has already been killed. Xiao Huang is already dead. You should be able to make up for the many cultivators of the Peacock bloodline today. The Peacock clan is one of the three great demon clans of Prajna. Therefore, I still hope that the Demon King will be merciful so that we can form a good relationship. What's more, how can Xiao Huang fight against an entire clan by himself? Lucidum continued. Haha. Sumo shook her head and said coldly, Supreme Lotus, forgive me for not being able to comply. In my heart, Xiao Huang is someone that not even the Peacock clan can compare to. Today, I will not be satisfied until I destroy the peacock. Lucidum's expression finally sank. Just now, he had tried his best to be amiable with Sumo. Originally, he thought that Sumo would be sensible and find a way out. He didn't expect Sumo to reject him directly. Does he really think that I'm afraid of him? Why are the cultivators of the three realms so stubborn? Haha. Demon King, you have to think twice before you act. I advise you to reconsider. Lucidum once again suppressed his emotions and waved his hand. Whoosh, when he looked again, the lotus petal that was supporting Fallen Star suddenly began to change. A faint white brilliance appeared on the lotus petal. The lotus petal seemed to have a life of its own. Fallen Star's divine soul slowly merged with it. Then, the lotus petal changed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It grew and grew. The lotus petal turned into a lotus in an instant. Then, the lotus bloomed, and a figure in white gradually appeared on the stamen. Whoosh, in an instant, Fallen Star appeared next to the lotus venerable in white. Apart from the color of her dress, Fallen Star looked exactly the same as before. In fact, her cultivation level had increased. Stage 3 Venerable Realm. Peacock Fallen Star kowtows to the Lotus Venerable. Thank the Lotus Venerable for giving me a new lease of life. Fallen Star knelt in the void and kowtowed to the spiritual Venerable. At that moment all the cultivators were astonished. Their eyes burned with passion. Although they knew that the Lotus Venerable would never treat them like that, they still felt a glimmer of hope when they saw it. Meanwhile, Sumo, Yuluo, and Yi Wuhui were startled. It should be noted that Sumo had spent a lot of effort to rebuild Yi Wuhui's body. However, they did not expect Lucidum to restore Fallen Star's body with a wave of his hand. The difference in strength caused Sumo and Yi Wuhui's hearts to sink. Yuluo raised her brows. She had a feeling that she could no longer kill Fallen Star. The feeling made Yuluo's heart feel extremely empty. Fallen Star, those who submit to me shall be granted eternal life. Lucidum smiled and waved his hand to help Fallen Star up. At that moment, everyone realized that he had rebuilt Fallen Star's body to show off his strength to Sumo. His cultivation base was enough to suppress Sumo's. Today, it was impossible for Sumo to destroy the Peacock tribe or even kill Fallen Star. Pressuring others with his power, the Lotus Venerable had the ability and the capital to do so. Lucidum looked at Sumo and asked, Demon King, have you thought about what I said just now? I have. Sumo nodded with a smile. Lucidum was startled. It seemed like his intimidation had worked since Sumo did not say anything. Therefore, Lucidum said with a smile, Demon King, what's your decision? Fallen Star's fatal blow. Sumo raised her eyebrows. Lucidum was startled again. He did not expect Sumo to say something like that at a time like this. As soon as Sumo finished speaking, Fallen Star screamed in pain. In an instant, black worms crawled out of her 7 orifices. Fallen Star's newly reconstructed physical body was instantly devoured. Lucidum's expression changed. It seemed like Sumo had planted the nether worms into Fallen Star's soul. Even if her physical body was reconstructed, Sumo could still kill Fallen Star at any time. Lucidum could not help but feel enraged at this thought. His attitude just now was already very clear. He wanted to protect Fallen Star, and even helped her reconstruct her physical body and increase her cultivation base. However, all of that was not worth mentioning in Sumo's eyes. In other words, Sumo did not think much of him. Lotus Knight. How could he be ignored? At that moment, Lucidum's heart sank as though he was sitting on a carpet of needles. Whoosh! Lucidum waved his hand and released a stream of lotus chi toward Fallen Star. He naturally wanted to save Fallen Star, but Sumo was already prepared for this. Just as Sumo said that Fallen Star would be killed, the yin-yang bell above his head charged toward her. The yin-yang bell could determine life and death. It was a top-notch lianhua. However, Sumo was still unable to unleash its full power at the moment. Therefore, Sumo did not go straight for Lucidum, but for Fallen Star. Because his goal was to kill Falling Star. If the yin-yang bell covered Fallen Star, she would surely die. Moreover, he had predicted that Lucidum would make a move. The yin-yang bell could stop him from interfering. At that moment, everyone was dumbfounded, including Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui. Although Sumo was attacking Fallen Star, it was undoubtedly a challenge to the Lotus Venerable. A Venerable challenging a Lotus Knight was asking for a quick death. However, that was what Sumo did, and he did so with great determination. He did not seem to consider the consequences. Buzz, boom. The yin-yang bell and Lucidum's white light appeared above Fallen Star's head at almost the same time. The white light struck the yin-yang bell, stirring up thousands of sound waves. The entire divine peacock shook from the sound waves. Whoosh! Fallen Star and the nether bug, one white and one black, instantly turned into smoke. Fallen Star's soul was extinguished. Chapter 841. There will be a new update for Samsara of the One Treasury today, before 12 o'clock. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 842. Fallen Star had destroyed her Tao and soul. This was definitely out of everyone's expectations. Even Linglian did not expect this. Fallen Star had been killed right in front of his eyes. He wouldn't have even thought about it a moment ago. In the Prajna realm, there was almost no cultivator who could kill someone he wanted to protect right in front of him. But now, that cultivator was standing not far from him. Boom, hum. The sound waves from the yin-yang bell didn't stop. The layers of sound waves in the air had already taken on a tangible form. The black and white sound waves alternated and spread in all directions. In an instant, all the cultivators within a 5-kilometer radius were in trouble. This was because Lucidum's white light had struck the yin-yang bell like a heavy hammer. Its aftermath was an indiscriminate attack. The aftermath of the lianhua was not something ordinary cultivators could withstand. Cultivators below the rebirth realm would be instantly killed. To the cultivators of divine Peafowl Mountain, it would be a disaster. Suppress. Meanwhile, the bamboo flute in Lucidum's hand had been tossed into the air. The flute vibrated in the wind. The melodious sound of the flute gradually rang out. Following the sound of the flute, the sound waves from before gradually subsided. The bamboo flute floated in the air. The bamboo flute and the yin-yang bell were only a few dozen feet apart. One was heavy, the other agile. The two pieces of lianhua formed a delicate balance without the control of their masters. By now, Fallen Star's aura had completely dissipated. Fallen Star was dead. Lucidum's expression was extremely ugly. Because even he couldn't bring Starfall back to life. Demon King, you really have guts? Lucidum glared at Sumo. At the same time, the lotus platform beneath him glowed faintly. The milky white light seemed to be approaching Sumo. At that moment, the other cultivators of divine Peafowl Mountain were also watching. Challenging the Lotus Sovereign meant certain death. Lucidum's attitude was no longer as gentle as before. In his opinion, Sumo had already embarrassed him. The Lotus Sovereign's power seemed to be useless against Sumo. The Milky Way shattered, and he lost his son and wife. I am but a rootless duckweed, drifting and hiding. I don't know how many lifetimes I've lived. Sumo smiled coldly. I don't know if he has guts. However, I'm not afraid of death, so I don't want to go against my conscience. Xing Luo is someone I must kill, and someone I can kill. If I can kill him, why shouldn't I? Ha ha ha! Hearing Sumo's words, Lucidum laughed in anger. Demon King, do you think this is the 3 realms of the past? Or is it your Star River? How laughable was it to be able to kill him? Today, I will let you know how to respect Venerable Lotus and how to compromise. When they looked again, Lucidum waved his hand. A lotus petal flew out from its lotus throne. The lotus petal was half white and half red, and when it flew out, it was only about 1 foot long. In an instant, it transformed into a long sword. The body of the Tao Lotus sword was 9 meters long. The tail of light it carried was hundreds of feet long. It came from the lotus throne and carried the aura of Venerable Lotus. Even though it was not a true Lianhua, it still had the power of Lianhua. The lotus sword was extremely fast. In an instant, it arrived in front of Sumo. Actually, Sumo was already prepared, but even so, the lotus sword's speed far exceeded his expectations. As for Sumo, with just a thought, the lotus vine had already flown out. However, his speed was still relatively slow. Boom, the lotus sword had already flown to within 100 feet of Sumo before his lotus vine hit him. If he had been a moment slower, the lotus sword might have pierced Sumo. When they looked again, the lotus sword had been smashed into pieces by the lotus vine. Hee. Lucidum could not help but laugh coldly on the lotus throne. As expected of a Dharma king's item. It is indeed powerful. Otherwise, how could a puny supremacy like you fight me? The lotus sword was smashed into pieces, but Lucidum did not care at all. Because, the moment the lotus sword was smashed, it turned into millions of lotus flowers. And each lotus flower was a flying sword. Covering the sky and earth, they headed straight for Sumo. At that moment, Sumo's lotus vine was useless. It was too late for him to retreat and defend. The sky was filled with a rain of lotus flowers. Yuluo's brows twitched. Just as she was about to activate the mystic yellow umbrella. Even though she was not sure if the umbrella could block the lotus swords, it seemed to be the best method. But, under Sumo's feet, there were suddenly tens of thousands of red lights. Whoosh! In response to those lotuses, Sumo's blood-colored rose flew out. 3 realms, evil flower. Puff puff, whoosh whoosh, in the air, there were countless lotus petals and evil spirit. They collided with each other and instantly turned into green smoke. Actually, Lucidum's lotus sword was far superior to Sumo's evil flowers. However, the lotus sword was limited while the evil flowers were endless. The evil flowers under Sumo's feet were endless. They advanced wave after wave like fierce warriors, disregarding life and death. Finally, 10 zhang away from Sumo, they blocked Lucidum's lotus sword. At the same time, the blood rose formed a defense around Sumo. They floated in the void, rising and falling. Red light spread out, and it was extremely beautiful. Lucidum's expression was calm when he saw this. Because he had not used his true abilities. He sat firmly on the lotus platform, not even intending to get up. Fighting Sumo, to him, was like an old man toying with a baby. He had too many ways to kill Sumo, but he could not kill Sumo right now. But he had to teach Sumo a lesson. Looking again, Lucidum lightly exhaled. His cheeks did not swell, and he simply blew a breath of air in a very normal manner. Whoosh! Looking again, a hurricane suddenly blew up on Divine Peacock Mountain. The gust of wind rose from Lucidum's mouth and instantly expanded to thousands of zhang, covering all the peaks. The black hurricane connected the sky and the earth. The cultivators on the ships outside Divine Peafowl Mountain couldn't help but frown when they saw this. It looked like Divine Peacock Mountain was about to be blown away by the hurricane. It seemed that if Venerable Lotus wanted to destroy a world, it would be effortless. Whoosh whoosh, when the hurricane arrived, the Bloody Rose's defense in front of Sumo was blown into pieces. It was a battle of a different level. Ever since Sumo obtained the Blood Rose in this life, she had never encountered such a situation. The evil flowers could not stop the black hurricane at all. The wind fell and the flowers scattered. However, the hurricane did not harm Sumo. It only blew away the Blood Rose defense. Looking again, Lucidum's lips curved. He reached out and held the horsetail whisk on his back in his hand. The horsetail whisk was a lienbua, and it was of a high level. At that moment, Sumo's defense was completely gone. Lucidum only wanted to intimidate Sumo. He wanted Sumo to understand that it was easy for him to kill her. So, Lucidum waved the horsetail whisk. Looking again, the horsetail whisk instantly became thousands of zhang long. Like a long whip, it lashed down from above, straight at Sumo. Lucidum's speed was too fast. He was so fast that Sumo had no chance to defend at all. The lotus vine could not return, and the other lienbua could not be summoned. The horsetail whisk's speed was faster than Sumo's thoughts. At that moment, Sumo's defense was wide open. In the end, Sumo was no match for Lucidum. The horsetail whisk fell from the sky, straight at Sumo's head. At that moment, a dark light flashed in Lucidum's eyes. He wanted to smash Sumo's body. Only then could Sumo know when to advance and retreat. He also spared Sumo's life. Sumo, Demon King, Yiwuhue and Yuluo shouted almost at the same time. However, they could do nothing. Lucidum's realm was almost beyond their imagination. No one could save Sumo. Whoosh! At that moment, a white light suddenly rose from Sumo's body. Chapter 843. Samsara of the One Treasury has no updates today, it will be updated in the future. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 844. There will be a new update for Samsara of the One Treasury today, before 12 o'clock. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 845. Lucidum was trying to intimidate Sumo with his horsetail whisk. It was enough to take Sumo's life. However, Lucidum had held back because he was wary. He only wanted to destroy Sumo's physical body. To Lucidum, a physical body could be destroyed with a single petal. However, it was impossible for a supremacy to do that. Therefore, Lucidum had chosen the safest way to punish Yi Lingchen. However, his confidence had been slapped in the face. The horsetail whisk's light was as sharp as a hammer and as powerful as a mountain. Theoretically, not even a ninth-layer supremacy could withstand the horsetail whisk's attack. However, a boundless white light suddenly appeared above Sumo's head. That beam of white light was even more blinding and dazzling than any of the other beams of light. The light illuminated the entire divine Peacock Mountain realm. The cultivators in the void outside the outer realm were all terrified. Everyone was dumbfounded. What light was that? Yuluo and Yiwuhue had already lost all hope. After all, Lucidum's power was unstoppable. If Sumo could not withstand his attack, there was nothing they could do. Sumo was done for. That was what they were thinking. However, the situation suddenly changed. The white light above Sumo's head forcibly blocked Lucidum's horsetail whisk. The horsetail whisk was snow-white and about 500 zhang long. It looked like a white river that floated in the void. The river started in Lucidum's hand, and the river ended in Sumo's head. However, the river remained motionless under the influence of a strange power. Lucidum's expression changed drastically. He saw a token hovering above Sumo's head. It was a white token. The token was no more than 3 inches long and 3 fingers wide. It was as white as jade, but there were no words on it. However, above it was the appearance of a village. There were mountains, rivers, and vaguely people. The token looked like a painting of a village. The background of the garden was actually a white mountain. There seemed to be a sea in front of White Mountain. On the sea there were also lotuses. White Mountain Decree. Lucidum was horrified. At the same time, he stood up on the lotus platform. With a shake of his hand, he withdrew his horsetail whisk. As for the token, he didn't want to profane it in the slightest. At this moment, he was regretting his rashness just now. He looked again and saw that the token above Sumo's head was emitting a faint halo. It floated above Sumo's head, rotating slightly like a shining star. Under the white mountain decree, Sumo stood tall. His white clothes seemed to be plated with a milky white radiance. However, his gaze was very cold. Sumo looked at Lucidum with lingering fear. It could be said that this token was his final protective talisman. This time, Sumo was lucky to win the bet. Previously, he still underestimated Lucidum's strength. Sumo thought that he relied on many lianbua and the secret technique of the two realms, not to mention the restriction of samsara and the magical footwork. He had many trump cards, so he should be able to contend with Lucidum for a while. At the very least, he could escape with Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui. However, in that instant just now, he didn't even have the chance to summon lianbua. Under the power of the Lotus Knight, he couldn't cast spells or take a step. To be honest, that was a situation that almost didn't exist in Sumo's memory. Today, if not for that token, Sumo would be in danger. After all, Sumo didn't know what Lucidum's bottom line was. Would Lucidum dare to kill him? Would he kill him? To Sumo, everything was unknown. Fortunately, he won the bet. However, at this moment, Lucidum was on the blacklist in Sumo's heart. In Sumo's view, Lucidum already had the intention to kill him. Therefore, although Sumo didn't die, his eyes were cold. White Mountain Decree? Lucidum stood on the lotus throne and looked at Sumo. He frowned and asked in a deep voice, "Demon King, is this token yours? Where did it come from?" Sumo sneered in his heart. It seems that Wang Shui's token has a big background. In a sense, the little girl had saved his life again. Hee hee. Sumo looked at Lucidum and smiled coldly. "Lucidum, are you asking the obvious? If this token isn't mine, is it yours? As for where it came from, I can't tell you." Hiss, when Lucidum heard it, he couldn't help but take a cold breath. In fact, before Lucidum came, he had already received instructions not to harm Sumo's life. However, he wasn't clear about the power behind Sumo. He was just following orders. Lucidum speculated that the power behind Sumo was most likely on an equal footing with his two masters. However, he didn't expect that Sumo actually had a White Mountain Decree on her. Venerable level cultivators might not even know what the White Lotus Decree meant. However, as a Lotus scholar, Lucidum was all too clear about the weight of the White Mountain Decree. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the White Mountain Decree was definitely the #1 token in the Izong world. Such a White Mountain Decree was enough to protect Sumo's life in the Izong world. In the entire Izong world, there were only a few cultivators who dared to ignore this token. Lucidum understood, not to mention himself, even if his two masters saw this token. He was afraid that they would also be at a loss and then sigh. White Mountain could be seen but not reached. Within the myriad of worlds, those who could look at White Mountain across the sea were supreme expert. And for Lucidum, he currently didn't even have the qualifications to look at White Mountain across the sea. Sumo was only a venerable level cultivator. However, why did he have a White Mountain Decree? In fact, this was what Lucidum was most puzzled about, and also what he was most apprehensive about. In theory, the one who held the White Mountain Decree was the envoy of White Mountain. The envoy of White Mountain should at least be a Lotus scholar. Because, in terms of status, the envoy of White Mountain was even higher than a Lotus scholar. In terms of realm, any envoy of White Mountain could be a Lotus cultivator. In other words, the envoy of White Mountain should at least be a Lotus scholar stage 3. His own realm was already extremely terrifying. And what was even more terrifying was that the envoy of White Mountain represented White Mountain. According to legend, White Mountain was a higher realm. On White Mountain, the envoy of White Mountain was like a cultivator child. However, legend was legend after all. No one knew if it was true or false. Because almost all the cultivators who ascended White Mountain never truly returned to their original world. The envoy of White Mountain would occasionally appear, but it was only for a brief moment before disappearing without a trace. In short, the White Mountain was an existence that transcended all realms. To the White Mountain, a single realm was only a single realm. Lucidum was stunned for a moment and did not speak for a long time. At that moment, he suddenly felt that there were many problems that he could no longer solve by himself. It was laughable that a Lotus scholar actually grew timid in front of a venerable. If that's the case. Lucidum dragged out his words, then frowned and said slowly, "Let's forget about today's matter. Demon King, this Peacock astral realm is up to you. Go." Wah! The cultivators inside and outside Divine Peacock Mountain were all shocked and shocked. Venerable Lotus was going to let it go just like that? Divine Peacock Mountain had suffered countless casualties and was almost destroyed, but this was it? Their Queen of Starfall had died for nothing? They could hardly believe it, because they did not recognize the White Mountain decree at all. However, although they were unwilling, they did not dare to disobey Venerable Lotus's words. Ha ha! However, at this moment, Sumo smiled and shook her head. Venerable Lotus, I can't just leave like this. Chapter 846. No. Whoosh. Sumo's words caused an even bigger uproar than when Lucidum let him go. At that moment, the surviving cultivators on the Divine Peacock Mountain were furious, because Sumo's answer was out of everyone's expectation. Lotus Supremacy already said to let bygones be bygones, but Sumo still said no? This was intolerable. Lotus Supremacy! Lotus Supremacy! A few reincarnation realm cultivators on the Divine Peacock Mountain called out to Lucidum, but they didn't dare to act rashly. Because Fallen Star was killed in front of Lotus Supremacy, what about them? Even with Lotus Supremacy's protection, it didn't seem to be absolutely safe. Thinking of this, they shut their mouth. At that moment, Lucidum's expression was calm, as if he didn't hear the voices of the cultivators. Demon King, is it still not enough? Of course not. Sumo shook her head. I came here to exterminate the Peacock clan. Fallen Star is dead, but there are still survivors. How can I be at ease? Sigh. When Ling Lian heard this, she could not help but sigh. Demon Lord, Xiao Huang's death was caused by Fallen Star after all. Back then, Fallen Star issued a kill order. Who knows how many demons in the Hanya realm wanted to kill Xiao Huang? If that's the case, then everyone in the Hanya realm has a share in Xiao Huang's death. Demon King, even if you have the ability, can you slaughter all of Hanya realm? Then, you won't be taking revenge, you'll be slaughtering all living beings. Slaughtering all living beings? Ha! Suemo couldn't help but laugh coldly. Revered Lotus, that's a really big accusation. Although I, Sumo, am not merciful, I won't slaughter all living beings. But I can't let the Peacock clan off like this. Yuluo, what do you say? Yuluo heard and nodded. Senior Demon King is right. I'm willing to listen to Senior's arrangements. Spiritual Supremacy smiled bitterly and nodded, then said to Sumo, Demon King, you have the White Mountain decree, so you're the White Mountain envoy. Today, this old man will form a good relationship with you. Just tell me what you want. As long as it's not too excessive, I can agree to anything. Sumo, thank you, Lotus Lord. Sumo cupped her hands and bowed to the Lotus Lord. Actually, he had no idea how powerful the token was. However, Sumo knew that a man who was not content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Lucidum was a Lotus scholar after all. If he was truly enraged, a token wouldn't be able to stop him. Therefore, Sumo did not intend to fight to the death. The so-called extermination of the Peacock clan was just a means of negotiation. Since Venerable Lotus has said so, then I, Sumo, am not unreasonable. I only have 2 requests, Sumo said. Lucidum laughed. Another 2 requests. One of them should be the whereabouts of the Plum Blossom sprite, right? To tell you the truth, Lucidum paused for a moment. Back then, it was Fallen Star who took me to seal the Plum Blossom Sprite. However, I only sealed her in a blue soul altar and sent her to a certain place. There are people guarding that place. I do not know what happened to her now. Sumo narrowed her eyes and her expression focused. What place? Who is guarding it? There's no hurry. Lucidum shook his head. Demon King, tell me your first request first. If I can satisfy you, we can talk about the second. Lucidum actually whetted Sumo's appetite. It seemed that he was afraid that Sumo's first request would be too excessive and make things difficult for him to resolve. After all, Fallen Star was dead. At this point, he did not want to be embarrassed. Sumo laughed. Of course he understood Lucidum's meaning. Venerable Lotus, your golden body is here today. Sumo did not dare to act rashly again. Fallen Star's death meant that her hatred was mostly gone. However, Divine Peafowl Mountain is very important. I will not destroy the peacock race. However, they must all leave Divine Peafowl Mountain. Also, there must be no venerable one in the peacock race. If they have a venerable one, Uluo and I will hunt them down. Divine Peafowl Mountain will no longer be controlled by the Wisdom Realm. This is my first request. He wanted Divine Peafowl Mountain to restrict the peacock race's cultivation. When the beings of the peacock race heard this, even though they were a little indignant, they heaved a sigh of relief. There were no rebirth realm peacocks left on Divine Peafowl Mountain. They had all been killed earlier. When the other cultivators heard that Sumo didn't have any requests, all the cultivators on God-destroying Mountain were secretly happy. What they feared the most was that Sumo would kill everyone on the mountain and the Venerable Lotus would compromise. At this time, Lucidum heard Sumo's request and smiled. Because Sumo understood very well that she did not make things difficult for him. Now, if Sumo really made a request to destroy the peacock race, he would not easily agree. After all, he controlled the Wisdom Realm and could not disregard everything. Divine Peafowl Mountain was already half destroyed. What harm was there in giving it to him? As for whether the peacock race had a venerable, it was completely negligible to him. Moreover, even without Sumo's request, the peacock race might not have a venerable in millions of years. The peacock race would be greatly weakened and would never be able to recover from this setback. Alright. I agree. Lucidum did not think much and nodded. From today onwards, Divine Peafowl Mountain belongs to the Demon King. Within the Wisdom Realm, no one will control this place, and the peacock race will no longer have a venerable. Venerable Lotus is straightforward. Sumo turned to Uluo. Uluo, you are the owner of this mountain from now on. After all, this is where you and Xiao Huang met. I will give this place to you. Uluo thanks Senior. Uluo bowed deeply to Sumo and at the same time sent a voice transmission to the Divine Mountain. The peacock race must leave today and never step into Divine Peafowl Mountain again. The rest of the demon race will come and go voluntarily. When the demon race of Divine Peafowl Mountain heard this, some were overjoyed. After all, it was difficult for many demon race to leave their homeland. They were not first-rate demon race, and did not participate in what happened back then. Where could they go? Sumo nodded and then looked at Venerable Lotus. Venerable Lotus, can you tell me where Wu Air is now? Yes. Lucidum no longer felt burdened. Thus, he sat on the Lotus platform again. Demon King, back then, Xing Luo was worried that you would come for revenge, so she asked me to seal the Plum Blossom Sprite in order to restrain you in the future. Originally, it was a small matter. However, after sealing it, I received instructions to send it to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean and let it be guarded by the Kuan Butterfly race. After that, I did not hear anything else. The Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean is guarded by the Kuan Butterfly race. Sumo raised an eyebrow. Venerable Lotus, is this true? Ha ha! Ling Lian chuckled. Do you think I would use such tricks to deceive others? Then who told you to send Wu Air to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean? Sumo continued to ask. When Lucidum heard this, he shook his head. Demon King, some things cannot be said. As he spoke, Lucidum waved a hand and a seal appeared in his palm. This seal is the method to open the Blue Soul altar. If you can see the Blue Soul altar, you may open it. Everything else will depend on your luck, Demon King. As he spoke, Lucidum flicked his hand. The seal turned into a spirit talisman and flew in front of Sumo. Whoosh! When she looked again, Lucidum's lotus platform suddenly flashed with light. The light it gave off instantly covered the entire divine mountain. Everyone, those who follow me, please open your hearts. Lucidum's voice echoed. The white light was blinding like the sun falling on the mountain. Whoosh! Everything disappeared in an instant. When she looked again, Lucidum wasn't the only one gone. The peacock race and many experts had been taken away by his white light. Chapter 847. Suddenly, half of God Peacock Mountain was empty. The cultivators who had followed Fallen Star had all left with Lucidum. They were afraid Uluo would punish them. Half of the cultivators in God Peacock Mountain were like that. Some of the demon clans, such as the Flying Wolf clan, even left. God Peacock Mountain was tens of thousands of miles wide. It was empty. The Yao that remained were not very strong. There were not many Break World cultivators. Most of them were undying and burial gods. There were even many red dust cultivators. They had been under Fallen Star's rule. They were all low-level Yao. Sumo, Uluo, and Uwuhue couldn't help but look at each other and smile when they saw that the divine Peacock Mountain, which had been covered in dust just a moment ago, was now completely silent. Life and death, coming and going. Maybe everything was like this. Greetings, Saint Uluo. In the distance, some cultivators were kneeling in the air. They bowed to Uluo. Their leader was a late-stage Break World cultivator. The others were burial gods. There was not a single Sea Destroyer cultivator. The wood. Uluo looked at them and felt complicated. That was because Xiao Huang was a wood cultivator. Over the years, the wood cultivators on God Peacock Mountain had been suppressed the most. They were probably at the bottom of the hierarchy. Rise. Uluo looked at them. Her voice spread across God Peacock Mountain. Anyone who remains on the mountain can focus on cultivation. You can stay in your caves for now. In the future, I will redistribute the caves. Now, many cultivators have left. Many are left. The resources of God Mountain are enough for everyone to improve. You just need to cultivate. Do not worry. These words calmed the hearts of the cultivators who remained. Thank you, Saint, said the leader of the wood cultivators. What is your name? Uluo asked. I am Yang Tian of the Wood, Yang Tian politely answered. Yes. Uluo nodded. The Peacock Mountain has nothing to do with us. From now on, God Peacock Mountain will be called Plum World. I will be in charge of everything here. I will follow your orders, Saint. Yang Tian bowed. Yang Tian arranged the affairs of the race. In 3 days, gather all the Break World cultivators in Plum World and meet me under the God Plum Tree. I'll arrange it myself, Uluo said. Under the divine plum tree? Yang Tian was startled. This was because there was no such thing as a divine plum tree on Divine Peacock Mountain. You'll see the divine plum tree soon, Uluo said. Yes. Yang Tian bowed and answered. He didn't ask any more questions and disappeared with his clansmen. There were many things waiting to be done in the apricot world. Now that Uluo had returned and was in control of everything, the Wood tribe could finally see the light of day. At that moment, Uluo raised her hand. The plum flower staff in her hand flew into the air and landed on the first peak at the center of the divine Peacock Mountain. Earlier, the first peak had been damaged, but the second peak was still there. After all, it wasn't the main battlefield just now. It was just affected. The plum blossom staff instantly transformed into a huge plum blossom tree that was tens of thousands of meters tall. Bang! It took root on the first peak. The entire first peak of the peacock had become its foundation. Then, the crown of the plum tree stretched out, extremely magnificent. The surrounding peaks were all covered by it. From afar, the former divine peacock mountain had now become a crown of plum trees. Whoosh! Yuluo flew forward and formed a seal with both hands. Looking again, the white plum blossom petals on the tree scattered in all directions. It was as if plum blossom rain had fallen on the entire divine peacock mountain. It was as if plum blossoms were raining all over the place. All the monsters saw this miraculous scene. The fragrance of plum blossoms spread throughout the mountain realm. At that moment, the entire plum world was filled with spiritual energy. For ordinary monsters, this was a great fortune. Many of them knelt on the ground and thanked Venerable Yuluo for her gift. At the same time, the many peaks that had just been destroyed were slowly changing. The landscape of the entire divine peacock mountain was also undergoing earth-shattering changes. A venerable could change an entire lesser world. The plum flower staff was a lianbua. Under Yuluo's control, its power was boundless. Boom, boom, the entire divine peacock mountain was changing. The earth shook, the mountains shook, rivers appeared, and plum blossoms bloomed. The world that was originally in a state of desolation began to show signs of vitality. The original 72 peaks, excluding the plum tree, had turned into 36 peaks. The surrounding peaks were innumerable. In some places, the peaks had turned into plains. In others, streams had turned into rivers. Green water and green mountains were everywhere. The plum tree was the source of all this. It constantly absorbed the power of the star world and turned it into nourishment for the plum world. The entire divine peacock mountain had undergone incredible changes under Yuluo's remodeling. At this time, the original form of the divine peacock mountain had disappeared from the universe. Although it was still a star continent, it had become flatter with the plum tree as its core. Its protective formation also had the shape of a plum blossom and the intent of a plum blossom. Moreover, the entire continent was filled with plum trees and plum blossoms. The scenery was beautiful and the cultivation level was extraordinary. Yuluo named it the Plum World, and it truly lived up to its name. Sumo and Yiwuhui watched silently. Everything Yuluo did showed her deep love and longing for Xiao Luo. Yuluo's infatuation is only for Xiao Huang. Yiwuhui looked at Yuluo's back as she formed seals, and could not help but let out a long sigh. Then, she turned her head and asked Suemo, "Suemo, can Xiao Huang be reborn? Rebirth?" Suemo frowned, then gently shook his head. "I actually hope that he can be reborn. However, not everyone could be reborn. If anyone can be reborn, then what's the meaning of death?" "Death has meaning?" Yiwuhui did not understand. "Of course." Sumo nodded. "What meaning?" "Only when you fear death can you appreciate the value of life. Only when you understand that death is endless darkness can you cherish the light of the present." Sumo sighed. "If death is just an ordinary sleep for anyone, then the cycle of life will be dull." "Oh!" Yiwuhui did not fully understand, but he felt like he understood something. "So, there is no true eternal life in the infinite worlds. It's just that it's not time yet." Sumo squinted her eyes. She remembered that even the White Guardian King did not reincarnate. Of course, there is no infinite reincarnation. Reincarnation is just a sleep, not the ultimate death. Hee. It's so funny. Back then, AMU and I had a huge battle for eternal life or reincarnation. Actually, we were both wrong." Sumo smiled helplessly. That was just a fragment of life. Sumo was really looking forward to reuniting with AMU. Maybe the two of them could drink and laugh at each other. Time had dulled many colors. Only when they understood each other would they be the last confidant. Sumo and AMU would definitely appreciate each other. But what about samsara travelers like the vast ocean white light? Yiwuhui did not know what Sumo was thinking and asked. "There must be a limit to Xing Fei's reincarnation," Sumo said, but I don't know what his limit is. Maybe he won't be reincarnated next time. Sigh. Hearing this, Yu Wuhui couldn't help but let out another long sigh. However, what did that sigh represent? Perhaps even she herself wasn't too clear about it. Several hours later, Yu Luo finished her technique. She looked around with tears in her eyes. Mei Lang, this is a world that I created for you. At that moment, the plum realm was filled with the fragrance of flowers and love. Chapter 848. There will be a new update for Samsara of the Ichizo today. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 849. The peacock was gone, and the plum blossoms were in full bloom. The god Peacock Mountain had become the plum world. Although the power of the cultivators here could not be compared to before, it was still an independent world. 3 days later, Yu Luo met Yang Tian and the others. In the entire plum world, there were only 11 break world cultivators left. Among them, Yang Tian and Fan Kuan, a spirit monster, had the highest level. Their level was pitifully low. So, Yu Luo made Yang Tian and Fan Kuan the left and right protectors, in charge of everything. The rest were 9 break world cultivators, each in charge of 4 peak. That way, the plum world had 36 peak. The area around the plum tree was a forbidden zone. No cultivators in the plum world could enter without Yu Luo's summons. Yu Luo gave them treasures and medicinal pellet. In the future, she hoped they could cultivate more and break through soon. As for the other matters, she set the rules and let Yang Tian and Fan Kuan handle them. In the world of cultivators, as long as they did not lack resources, everything was easy. For the plum world, what it lacked the least was resources. It was a big place, full of spirit chi, but there were not many cultivators. The powerful cultivators who had followed Lucidum had left behind many treasures, caves, and palaces. There were enough to choose from. So, everything was easy. Yu Luo did not spend too much energy on these things. She had avenged Xiao Huang. But she still could not find Plum Blossom 5. What Lucidum had said should be true. But if they wanted to go to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean, they needed to think about it. After all, the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean was not something the god Peacock Mountain could compare to. The Kuan Butterfly clan was the real overlord of the Prajna realm. Its venerables, both in terms of quantity and quality, could not be compared to the peacock and the Kirin. Now, there was a plum valley under the plum tree. Yu Luo refined and purified the Yu Luo Hall where she had cultivated and brought it here. However, she preferred to find a quiet place in the plum valley to look at the plum blossoms alone. That way she would feel more at ease. 7 days later, Su Mo, Yu Luo, and Yi Wuhui sat on the ground under an ancient pagoda tree in the Apricot Valley to discuss matters. Earlier, Sumo had asked Yu Luo about the plum blossom staff. He said that he gave the plum flower staff to Wang Shui. Unfortunately, Yu Luo didn't know Wang Shui at all. The plum blossom staff was given to her by her master, Yun San. When the plum blossom staff was in her hands, it was already a lianhua. This meant that before that, someone had already refined it again. As for who refined it, no one knew. Yun San should be a Lotus scholar now, right? Sumo asked Yulu. That should be the case. Yuro nodded. Previously, I sensed that Lucidum's aura wasn't as strong as my master's. However, Master has never said that she is a Lotus warrior. Lotus Scholar. It's a pity that we can't tell at all what stage of the Lotus realm that Lucidum is at. Sumo sighed softly. Other than Yun San, have you seen the other supremacies of the Three Realms galaxy? No. Yuro shook her head. Sumo nodded. This answer was within his expectations. However, he thought that since Yun San had already become a Lotus scholar, then perhaps the other 3 supremacies should have become Lotus scholars as well? Including the number 1 person in the post-supremacy era, Mo Lang. he should also be a lotus scholar. Entering the mortal realm from the sea was most likely not truly entering the mortal realm. Sumo recalled Wang Yu's words. The reason why he could survive in the Izong world without any mishaps was because there was someone who carried the burden for him. This time, Lucidum's attitude was more gentle. Sumo guessed that it was probably because of the power that once existed in the three realms. Other than that, Sumo couldn't think of anyone else who could carry the burden for him. The Windwheel faction? Sumo thought of another possibility. However, even though he had become a supremacy, he didn't seem to have any more clues about the Windwheel faction. However, as Sumo's realm grew, he increasingly felt the mysteriousness of the Windwheel faction. Where exactly was the Windwheel world? Perhaps after finding Wu Air, he should return to the White Bone mainland to take a look. He should ask Bai Lai, who stayed behind in the Divine Tribulation sect. Sumo, it seems that you have a powerful force supporting you from behind. Perhaps that is the power of the three realms. Yi Wuhui's thoughts were the same as Sumo's. Unfortunately, Miss Wang Shui didn't come this time. She gave you a token, yet Lucidum was so afraid. Not to mention the venerated one. It seems that Wang Shui's realm is far above our expectations. Sumo said. Back then, Songhai said that there was a white mountain at the Immeasurable Ferry. The place that Amu and Shun Yan wanted to go back then was probably White Mountain. However, they probably didn't succeed. If Wang Shui is from White Mountain, then it's not ordinary. White Mountain Decree, White Mountain Envoy. Unfortunately, we don't really understand the meaning behind it. Otherwise, we would have a better judgment, Yu Luo said. White Mountain. It seemed that only a Lotus scholar could clarify things. Sumo, when are we going to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean? Yi Wuhui asked. Let's wait a while. Sumo sighed. The Plum Realm has just stabilized, so it needs some time to recuperate. The Qilin clan's army should have killed their way into the Peacock Star Realm. Let's take a look at the situation in the Wisdom Realm. I wonder what the Wisdom clan will do? It won't be too late to go to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean after taking a look. During this time, we can cultivate well. Yes. Yi Wuhui nodded. Thus, Sumo and the others temporarily stayed in the Plum Realm. Peacock Forest Bamboo Zen Star. This square-shaped star was still gorgeous and beautiful. The large lake in the center was blue and blue. There was an island in the lake with excellent scenery. Above the immortal tree, the cold moon and lonely star were intertwined. At this time, they were all disheveled, their hair was disheveled, and their faces were flushed. They also looked somewhat lazy. It was a scene that would make both male and female cultivators' hearts beat faster and their faces turn red. The peerless beauties of all realms were nothing more than this. Ling Yu and Lonely Star exuded a boundless evil charm. That kind of evil charm was not something other cultivators could compare with. Ling Yu hugged Lonely Star and leaned close to his ear. Her red lips parted slightly, and her breath smelled like orchids. Lonely Star, how is it just now? Lonely Star's charming eyes were like silk. Then, he turned his head and gently kissed Ling Yu's lip. The bliss of all realms is incomparably beautiful. The two of them laughed at the same time. At this time, if a true Almighty saw them, they would frown slightly. Ling Yu and Lonely Star were dressed in white and green respectively. However, their lower bodies were completely entangled, and their upper bodies were covered by cloud-like muslin clothes. Around them, faint clouds and mist curled around them. Immortal beauties, the ancestors of the demon race. The taste of that moment was indescribable, inexplicable, and incomprehensible. However, it did not feel the slightest bit obscene. Instead, there was a kind of romantic beauty. And at this time, the voice of a boy came from the void. Lucidum requests an audience with the two ancestors. The voice was crisp and extremely pleasant to the ears. It did not sound old at all like that day at Divine Peacock Mountain. Come in. Ling Yu and Lonely Star were slightly displeased. After all, they had not had enough entanglement. However, Lonely Star still waved his hand. Whoosh, in the sky above Bamboo Zen Star, a door of light opened wide. Chapter 850. Bamboo Zen Star, Round Sky and Square Earth. At this moment, above the great lake, the divine gate was wide open. He looked again and saw a boy descending from the sky. It was none other than Lotus Lucidum. However, Lucidum was wearing a short green robe, holding a bamboo flute and stepping on a lotus flower. His face was young and inexperienced. What he was standing on was not a huge lotus platform, but a lotus. His appearance remained the same, but his temperament was completely different from the Lucidum who had appeared in front of Sumo previously. On Divine Peacock Mountain, Lucidum was a lofty existence with boundless might. At this moment, he had really become a little boy who was standing respectfully. Ling Yu and Lone Star were in high spirits, but unfortunately, they were interrupted by Lucidum. However, they had plenty of time in the future, so they weren't annoyed. Ling Yu looked at Lucidum and said, "What? Has the matter with the Peacock clan been settled?" "Patriarch, it's done." Lucidum lowered his head and said, When Lone Star saw Lucidum's expression, he could not help but ask, "Why? Did it not go well?" Lucidum whispered. Lung Yu and Gu Xing couldn't help but laugh at the same time. "What? That demon king is only a venerable. What can he do to a Lotus Realm cultivator like you?" "Lien I heard that the demon king has a peerless face. Could it be that you have taken a fancy to him?" Gu Xing laughed. Lucidum knew the temperament of the two ancestors very well, but she still couldn't help blushing. "It's fine." Lung Yu also said, "Lien if you really have a mortal heart, then you should be able to see it. Gu Xing and I will definitely fulfill your wish. Coincidentally, we also want to go back to the village. How about I leave this Bamboo Zen Star to you and that demon king?" The two old ancestors echoed each other, not serious at all. Lucidum blushed from the teasing. No matter how high his cultivation was, he was just a child in front of the two patriarchs. "Two ancestors, it's not what you said." Lucidum quickly got to the point. Otherwise, with the two ancestors' temperament, they would not take it seriously. Not to mention Divine Peacock Mountain, even the Prajna world would collapse. To Ling Yu and Lone Star, this might not be a big deal. They had each other, and it was fine as long as they were alive. "The Demon King is the White Mountain emissary," Lucidum said. Ling Yu and Gu Xing, who were teasing him earlier, could not help but be stunned. Originally, they were snuggling together, but now they couldn't help but sit up straight. "Is that true?" Ling Yu asked. "How would Lien dare to lie?" Lucidum said, feeling wronged. "Did he take advantage of you?" Lone Star asked. Lucidum hurriedly shook his head, speechless. What was going on in the minds of the two patriarchs? "Then how did you know he was envoy by Shan?" Lone Star asked. As soon as Linglian heard that, she recounted everything that had happened that day from beginning to end. When he mentioned that Sumo was protected by a White Mountain medallion, Ling Yu and Lone Star exchanged a glance. They didn't care. It was Lucidum's decision to save the peacocks. They didn't care at all. Just as they had said, destroying a few worlds and killing a few sovereigns was nothing. However, they hadn't expected Sumo to possess a White Mountain medallion. They knew better than Lucidum what a White Mountain medallion meant. After all, even the demon race's patriarchs hadn't been able to ascend White Mountain. They weren't qualified to do so. Sumo, who was from the Shatter World, actually possessed a White Mountain medallion. That was unbelievable. In the end, Lucidum said that he had shown Sumo where the Plum Blossom sprite was sealed, and had given her the talisman to open the seal. Then, he had brought back some demons and settled them down. Ling Yu and Lone Star nodded. "Yeah. You did a good job, Lien. By this time, Lone Star had already calmed down. With a smile, he said to Lucidum, if he really goes to the Kuan Butterfly Star Sea, you don't have to worry about him anymore. Immortal Lotus will deal with him. Yeah. Lucidum nodded. Then, he asked, what should I do if I run into the Demon King next time, Patriarch? Lone Star went blank for a moment before pursing his lips into a smile. What should you do if you don't want him next time? If you don't want him next time, you'll have to take a detour. Take a detour if you don't want him next time? Lucidum realized that the two patriarchs didn't want him to get into trouble either. Lien'er understands. Lucidum said respectfully. Go and play. Lung Yu said with a smile. Don't offend a venerable realm emissary by Shan. I don't think he would dare do anything to you. If something really happens, we will naturally support you. Don't be afraid. Lone Star covered his mouth and laughed. Yeah. Lucidum pouted. Lien'er is not afraid. I just don't want to cause trouble for the two patriarchs. Lien'er, I hope the two patriarchs will be happy every day in this bamboo Zen world. Lien'er will take care of the matters outside. Lucidum's mouth was as sweet as honey. Ling Yu and Lone Star giggled. They knew that Lucidum was clever and had a sweet mouth, but they were willing to listen to this little fellow. You've worked hard. Lone Star smiled. Then, he raised his hand and waved it lightly. His hand was as white as jade, slender and soft. It was a beautiful hand. Whoosh! He waved his hand in the air, stirring up a gust of wind. Looking again, the bamboo flute in Lucidum's hand was directly swept up by it. In the breeze, the bamboo flute constantly danced and spun. For a time, it made a whining sound like the sound of a flute. Lucidum's bamboo flute was made of a special spirit bamboo. Originally, the flute had a total of 12 blowholes, membrane holes, and sound holes. There were a total of 23 five-colored threads. The scarlet tassels were more than a foot long and gently fluttered. The bamboo flute was the lianbua that Ling Yu and Lone Star had personally refined. However, at this moment, a small vortex suddenly appeared in the middle of the winding threads. Bang! A soft sound was heard. A gust of wind directly penetrated the body of the flute, and a new flute hole appeared in the middle of the winding threads. Then, the gust of wind emitted by Lone Star instantly turned tangible and flew directly into the flute hole. Then, the winding threads returned to normal, and outsiders could not see that there was a flute hole hidden under it. At this moment, Lucidum's face was full of joy. This was because he knew that the patriarch was refining the bamboo flute for him. Whoosh! A moment later, the bamboo flute fell back into Lucidum's hands. Lien'er, add a hole to your flute and name it Life and Death. That flute hole contains a wisp of Ling Yu's and my lotus intent. When this hole sounded, the other holes were extinguished without a sound. With this, you can kill a level 3 Lotus Warrior Cultivator. However, this hole can only be used 3 times. After 3 times, the bamboo flute will be destroyed. Do you understand? Lone Star said. Yes. Lien'er will remember. Lucidum was full of smiles. Go and play. Lone Star said again. Yes. Lucidum rode the lotus and left happily. After Lucidum left, Lone Star looked at Ling Yu and said, It seems that someone in White Mountain is secretly helping the people of the Three Realms galaxy. Otherwise, the White Mountain Decree would definitely not appear on Sumo. The White Mountain Decree recognizes an owner. That must have been given to him by someone else. He definitely would not have obtained the White Mountain Decree himself. Yes. Lung Yu nodded, then sneered. White Mountain's attitude is very interesting. I wonder if that Heartless knows about this? Suemo actually had a ticket for the White Mountain Ferry in his hand. Let's take some time to go back to the town to take a look. Lone Star said with a frown. Yes. Lung Yu smiled and nodded, however, it's fine. We have no desires. It's just a ticket. It's the same whether we fight for it or not. With you around, I have no other desires. Lung Yu and Lone Star looked at each other and smiled, then lingered together. White clouds rose around them. Chapter 851. Amidst the clouds, sounds of teasing and panting could be heard. Ling Yu's and Gu Xing's white and green clothes floated up and down in the clouds. Flirtatious sounds could be heard continuously. The bliss of many worlds seemed to be here, and it was not something that outsiders could understand. There were many living beings on Bamboo Zen Star. Most of them did not have spiritual intelligence, and some of them were half awakened and half muddled. In essence, this was the most unadorned star. The mountains were pure, the water was pure, and the living beings were also pure. It was like the childhood of all things. Ling Yu's and Gu Xing's joyful sounds were like a tide on this star. Loud sounds, low sounds. That beautiful voice did not give off the slightest feeling of lust. Instead, it had a kind of beautiful rhythm. All living beings were already used to it. Ling Yu and Gu Xing were the masters of this star, and they could even create all things. In the eyes of living beings, gods should not be questioned. They were high above. What Ling Yu and Gu Xing enjoyed the most was the freedom here. How could fallen mortal town's broken sleeve village be as beautiful as this? Although the people of fallen mortal town were extraordinary, and even extraordinary, in Ling Yu's and Gu Xing's eyes, they all carried a dusty aura. The pure fragments on their bodies were all refined later on, and not in their original form. As the clouds became thicker, Ling Yu's and Gu Xing's voices became louder. Waves rose in the celestial lake. Layers of waves rose and fell. A huge whirlpool even appeared in the center of the lake. Then, countless waves clustered together, layer by layer, and continued to rise. Following Ling Yu's and Gu Xing's voices, they rose tens of feet, hundreds of feet, thousands of feet. The celestial lake churned and surged. Everything continued for a full 6 hours. Whoosh! Finally, the wave tower in the center of the lake collapsed. Countless splashes of water splashed onto the surface of the lake. The clouds disappeared, the rain stopped, and the fog gradually dissipated. Ling Yu and Gu Xing gradually revealed their true faces and smiled at each other. Only they knew the bliss. It was a bliss that other people in the worlds would never understand. Ling Yu, how do you think we compare to that happy female supreme? Gu Xing asked. Better, but not worse. Ling Yu smiled and said, It is said that happy female supreme indulges in pleasure every night. But how can such a vulgar thing compare to our bliss? However, it seems like our cultivation level is lower than hers. Gu Xing frowned. It's just that our pursuits are different, said Ling Yu. The joyful girl is happy all her life and has seen countless people. She took the right path of dual cultivation, but in the end she took the path of purification, because she could only advance by absorbing the energy of the world lotus. That Kunlun realm became her private territory. That kind of cultivation might seem powerful. However, I feel that I will definitely suffer the wrath of the heavens. She planted the lotus herself, so she's the heavens. Why would there be divine punishment? Lone Star was puzzled. There are lotuses beyond lotuses, and there are heavens beyond heavens. Lung Yu looked at the void of the Bamboo Zen Star and sighed. We have cultivated for countless years. We always thought that if we reached a higher realm, we would be able to reach the peak. But no matter how high we are, we can't see the border. Because vast universe would never have an end. After climbing over a mountain, there was another mountain. Previously, we were only blocked by the mountain. Gu Xing smiled helplessly. That's right. Lung Yu said, So what if we entered the true law realm? Outside the true law realm, there must be a new realm. Everything has no end and the cycle repeats. So we are still the happiest. Gu Xing smiled. Yes, that's right. The people of fallen mortal town seem to have no desires, but they can't see through everything. Lung Yu also smiled. However, let's pack up and prepare to return to the village. All right. Gu Xing nodded. However, I hate the stench on their bodies. Me too. Ling Yu nodded. With that, the two of them stood up. At this moment, if someone was here, they would notice. Their white and green robes were actually several zhang long. They rose from the immortal tree and floated like immortals. They seemed to have no lower bodies. That's right. That Sumo wants to go to the Kuan butterfly realm. Do we need to make arrangements? You must know that the seal of the plum blossom sprite was not our idea. We cannot be the scapegoat. Hee hee. Ling Yu smiled. Xianlian will take care of everything. She is much smarter than Lucidum. She will definitely be able to get things done. We don't need to worry. It's good enough that she doesn't let others take the blame. Gu Xing nodded. In the void, a door of light appeared. Thus, the two held hands and disappeared. Plum Realm. Yuluo had been in charge of Plum Realm for 10 years. 10 years was nothing to a powerful cultivator. However, this time was enough for the affairs of Plum Realm to stabilize. With Yuluo's help, Yang Tian and Fan Kuan had become sea destruction cultivators. Advancing to the sea destruction realm in 10 years was absolutely unimaginable for them. Their talents were average, and in the Starfall era, they had almost no decent resources. If not for Yuluo, they might not have been able to become sea destruction cultivators their entire lives. However, they were already at the early stage of sea destruction. Divine Peacock Mountain becoming Plum Realm changed the fate of many demons. The advancement of the two great protectors gave other demons hope. Thus, the atmosphere of Plum Realm was extremely good, like a paradise. Sumo and Yi Wuhui spent the past 10 years meditating under the plum tree. Of course, they did not need the plum tree's power to cultivate. However, under the plum tree was a forbidden area, so it was relatively quiet. In the past 10 years, Sumo had returned to the Soul Storage Altar Cave once. There was not much change in the cave abode. However, Sumo did not understand why the blue urn had appeared in the Soul Storage Altar Cave abode and then disappeared. In the past 10 years, half of the original Peacock Star Realm had been annexed by the Qilin clan. The army of the Qilin clan had almost swept the entire Peacock Star Realm. Everywhere they went, people surrendered at the mere sight of them. However, the venerables of the Qilin clan did not make a move. In fact, after Yuluo had taken over Divine Peacock Mountain, the Qilin clan had guessed everything that had happened back then. However, none of the venerables dared to come to Plum Realm for revenge. Of course, the Qilin clan could not pass through Peacock Forest either. The former Peacock Star Realm only existed in name. However, there was an invisible hand that maintained the balance of the entire Prajna realm. Sumo and Yuluo knew that it must be Lucidum. Only he could stop the Qilin clan's revenge. Thus, Peacock Forest and Plum Realm became existences like the Desert Star Sea. They no longer belonged to any clan and formed their own realm. The Kuan Butterfly clan did not participate in any major battles. They were in the northern part of Prajna realm, aloof from worldly affairs. However, on this day, Sumo opened his eyes under the plum tree. Because it was almost time. He needed to go to the Kuan Butterfly Star Sea to find Wu Er. This should be the last stop. Sumo looked at the Lucidum seal in his palm and thought to himself. Chapter 852. In the Prajna demon race, the Kuan Butterfly was publicly acknowledged to be number 1. Neither the peacock nor the Kirin could compare to the Kuan Butterfly for tens of millions of years. No matter if it was the number of experts, their levels, or the region of stars, they were not truly on equal footing. Although the three races were equal, the disparity between them was huge. Now, the peacock race had been struck into the depths of the abyss. They would probably never be able to make a comeback. Even though the Qilin clan occupied close to a third of the Sanskrit world, for the time being, the Qilins definitely didn't dare look at the Kuan Butterfly on equal terms. The Kuan Butterfly Star Realm was in the north of the Hanya realm. It occupied a bit more than a third of Sanskrit world, possessing at least 3,000 small worlds. Almost every one of these 3,000 small worlds was guarded by a rebirth realm expert. Although these small worlds all belonged to the Kuan butterfly race, they were also extremely powerful. 3,000 cycles of reincarnation, just thinking about it was terrifying. Just this alone was something that no Hanya starfield could compare to. Even in Yizong World's four most famous middle-level worlds, Chun Luo, Ancient Lotus, Prajna, and Valurium, the Kuan butterfly race was second to none. The Kuan butterfly galaxy was the core of the Kuan butterfly race. It was made up of a total of 770 small worlds, a total of 7,777 stars. This was once ranked first among the core worlds of the three great demon clans. On average, a small world was made up of 10 stars. Of course, there were more and less of them. At the same time, these 7,777 stars were relatively close to each other. From the outside of the Great Wisdom World, it looked like a sea of stars. That's why it got its name. Although the Kuan butterfly star ocean was huge, it was not easy to enter unless one was a cultivator from the Kuan butterfly star ocean. This was because there was an invisible barrier around the Kraken butterfly star ocean. The cultivators outside the starry sea could not see the barrier at all. They could not even sense its existence. However, once you step into the Kuan butterfly star ocean, you will fall into the misguided maze. However, the barrier did not harm anyone. Those who were lucky might be able to pass through, but the vast majority of cultivators would be teleported out. It was like a maze array that prevented more cultivators from entering the Kuan butterfly star ocean. On the other hand, the cultivators of the Kuan butterfly star ocean did not have such a problem. Because they all had the Kuan butterfly mark on them, they could automatically enter the sea of stars without being affected. Rumor had it that the Kuan butterfly star ocean's spiritual energy and resources were 100 times that of the outside world. Thus, it was a place that the entire Prajna monster clan yearned for. Any cultivator who could pass through the barrier and enter the star sea was a legal existence. The Kuan butterfly race will allow you to cultivate and live in the star ocean. Therefore, there were countless cultivators wandering outside the Kuan Dai star sea. In the Prajna world, many monsters reached the late stage of the break world and came to try their luck. They were like gold miners because they would reap the rewards once they entered the Kuan butterfly star ocean. And one day, if you want to leave, you won't be restricted. The Kuan butterfly star ocean was mysterious and powerful. Outside the Kuan butterfly star, 3 million miles away, there was a small planet in this star domain. It was one of the planets closest to the Kuan butterfly planet. On this planet, there were only a few small cultivation sections. Among them, the cultivator with the highest cultivation level was only at the undead realm. This planet was in the periphery of the Kuan butterfly star ocean, a low-level cultivation world. Night fell. From that star, one could see an extremely gorgeous and brilliant starry sky. The Prajna world was too beautiful. The beauty of a poisonous butterfly extended to every corner of the starry sky. At that moment, in a valley, there was a bamboo forest. Many people were lying in the bamboo forest. It seemed that they were mountain people who went up the mountain to cut bamboo. When they were tired, they would spend the night in the bamboo forest. Among them, there was a woman. She was wearing plain clothes, and her hair was unkempt. It was impossible to tell her age. However, if she washed her face and changed into new clothes, she would definitely be a beauty. She had a bamboo cutting knife at her waist. The knife was dark and almost lusterless. The handle of the knife was wrapped in a yellowed white cloth. There was also a chip on the blade. The entire saber didn't seem to fit him at all. At that moment, the woman was leaning against a thick bamboo. Her eyes were closed, as if she had fallen asleep. Around her, most of the people were men, and some were already snoring. The surroundings were very quiet. They seemed to be extremely ordinary mountain people on this planet. They were not even cultivators. They were too tired. Perhaps they were used to the night here. Therefore, no one looked up at the starry sky and enjoyed the night. Suddenly, in the starry sky, 3 meteors streaked across. In fact, that was also a common scene at night. However, ordinary mortals did not know that they were not meteors, but cultivators crossing the starry sky. Whoosh! At this moment, the 3 meteors actually landed directly on this star. They were 3 cultivators. They had landed on a short mountain not far from the bamboo forest. 1 man and 2 women. The male cultivator was dressed in white and was as handsome as a demon. There were 2 female cultivators, one dressed in black and the other in a blue dress. They were none other than Sumo, Yuluo, and Yi Wuhui. The journey from the Apricot Realm to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean was extremely long. Even if they rode on a demon ship and continuously jumped through space, they would not arrive quickly, and it would consume a lot of energy. Therefore, they did not jump through space. Instead, they used flying magic treasures to directly pass through half of the Prajna star realm. They flew for an entire month. Fortunately, there were 3 of them, and Sumo would also release the little white pig and the black feather god Hong to relieve their boredom. Therefore, the journey was not boring. Tonight, they landed on this star because they wanted to rest for a while before heading straight to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. Sumo, the scenery here is not bad, Yi Wuhui said. Moreover, there are no powerful immortal sections. At that moment, her divine sense had already explored the entire star. This is a quiet and secluded star. Yuluo also said. Yes. Sumo also explored the area with her divine sense. At the same time, he waved one hand, and the mountain people in the bamboo forest had already fallen asleep. This is the last star we can land on. Yuluo smiled and said, the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean is 3 million miles away. Let's rest for a few hours. Sumo and Yi Wuhui nodded. At that moment, Sumo released the little white pig. That fellow disappeared as soon as it came out. However, Sumo did not care about it. She let such a low-level star do as it pleased. As long as it did not harm others, it was fine. Yuluo, is the Kuan Butterfly Barrier really that difficult to pass through? Sumo sat cross-legged on a small mountain and asked. Yes. Yuluo nodded. Actually, that is a method used by the Kuan butterfly lineage to control the population of cultivators. After all, there are too many cultivators who want to enter the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. However, we are already at the Supremacy Realm, so it should not be a problem. Sumo nodded. However, passing through the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean has nothing to do with one's realm. The Desolate Shadow's voice sounded. The Kuan Butterfly Barrier is known as the most mysterious illusion array in the Prajna realm. Unfortunately, my imprint was erased back then, or I could enter. Sumo smiled bitterly when she heard that. There must be a path in front of the mountain. Let's wait and see. At that moment, the eyelashes of the woman in the bamboo forest moved slightly. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.